I'm in charge of this man.
No longer, madam. He is now in the custody of the Ministry of Science.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
One day they'll tell a story, and some will say it was just a fairy tale about a human who came from the stars and changed our world.
Bow your head!
Get 'em out and get 'em clean!
Next you'll be telling us these beasts have a soul.
Is there a soul in there?
Where are you from?
United States Air Force, I'm going back, but we underestimate this human. The hell are they? Get me the spaceman. Kill them all.
You came.
Hey, Mr. Wahlberg, how are you? I really like your underwear commercials.
Hey, Mr. Burton. It's great to meet you. I'm a huge fan of your movies. Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Beetlejuice, Batman. You're such an artist, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Wahlberg. I like to think I've left my stain on humanity in some way.
Yeah, man. So, Planet of the Apes. I'm in. What do you want, man? You want me to play a monkey? You want me to play Statue of Liberty? I'm in. I'll suck a monkey's dick if it gives me the part, Tim. I just want a chance to be in a Tim Burton film, you know? I'll put the scissors on my hands. I'll say Beetlejuice 3 times. Shit, I think I already said it twice, man.
Yeah, Fox wants us to make it like now, and it's a bit rushed, and we were thinking you could be the lead, maybe. Take on the Charlton Heston role.
No fucking loincloths, Tim. I'll snap necks if I have to wear one. No way. You can't make me. But I'll do anything else. You want me to have a threesome with you and Lisa Marie? I'll do it. You want me to be Pee Wee Herman? I'll do it. Whatever, man.
Well, you'd be a different character, but still the hero.
Oh, yeah? I could do that. I could be the hero, Tim. I could hero the shit out of it. I'm lifting right now. I'm not going to stop. You see. I'm going to show up looking like the Incredible fucking Hulk.
Well, there will certainly be fight scenes, but you'd play an astronaut who goes to the ape planet.
An astronaut, eh? I was almost an astronaut for Michael Bay. Then Affleck took that fucking part. Could you cast him as a monkey so I could beat his fucking ass?
We're actually looking at Tim Roth for the villain role.
Oh, yeah? Tim Roth? Honey Bunny? I'll kick his ass, too. I'll beat Mr. Orange's ass back down the evolutionary chain. You got it, Burton.
You certainly have a lot of passion, and that's something we are looking for.
Oh, passion, huh? Tim, I already told you I'd suck a monkey's dick. I'll have a threesome with you and Lisa Marie. I'll do what I gotta do. I'll curb stomp Tim Roth and Affleck. You just let me know. I'm there. So fucking cast me, bitch.
Well, it sounds like we found our guy.
Fucking A you did, Tim. Fucking A. I'm your guy. I'm training now. I'm gonna pack on 80 pounds, you'll see. I'm gonna show up as an 800-pound gorilla. Except human.
We'd actually like you to be less...
I'll be ready, Tim. I'll be ready.
Why the fuck did I agree to do this movie?
Come on. Okay, let's go explain evolution to the monkeys.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another commentary. This time we are going to be watching Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes from 2001. And I am joined today by one of my favorite people, one of my oldest friends, Mr. Zaki Hasan. Zaki, welcome and thank you for joining us on this commentary.
Thank you for having me. I can't think of a more interesting selection than this. I feel like we'll have a good conversation about it, I feel like.
Absolutely. So For those that don't know, I met Zaki during my college years in Chicago, and he was such a great dynamic to the group. Zaki is a very smart, very well-read, very when you talk about an informed geek, Zaki fits that mold perfectly.
Oh wow, I appreciate that.
And Zaki I've been wanting to do a commentary with Zaki for a long time because I love Zaki. Zaki and I have also made movies together in our college days, which I cherish. We would be canceled immediately if they were in the public eye, or at least people would try to retroactively cancel us. They are amazing movies, okay? And one day maybe you'll get to see them. I don't know, probably not. But they're amazing movies. And I had a blast working with them, and I love showing them to people. And every time I do, and especially 3 Men in a Body 2, it always takes me back. And it makes me really miss those days when me and Zaki and our other friend Sean, who's also guested on the commentary shows, just hung out and did all kinds of fun stuff. So those are the good days.
Brian Hall.
Brian Hall. Good old Brian Hall. And Tony Calavalli.
That's right. That was, we're talking early 2000, like 99, 2000.
Yeah, like 99, 2000. I mean, cool. A lifetime ago. But it does feel like yesterday. I can whenever I watch those old movies, they take me right back, and I'm just like, those were the days.
It was an era of my life that we'll never get it back, but we'll always have it's just like you said, I just think back, and I have pleasant memories of it. Yeah,
it lives in a time capsule for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the reasons that I chose rather, and we agreed upon it. Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes is that Zaki is the biggest Planet of the Apes fan I've ever met in my entire life. Probably next to Superman, I would say between Superman and Planet of the Apes, if you needed an expert or a subject matter expert, you call Zaki. That's just the way it is. Now, that's not to say that this is Zaki's favorite version. Zaki, I know you are, so you grew up, why don't you give us just a real quick summation of what your draw is to Planet of the Apes, because you have always been super into it, all the way back to the old Charlton Heston films. So where did that come from? Where does what's the appeal to you for the Apes films?
That's something that I think about sometimes, because at the time that I became a fan, I mean, the film series had been done for a long time, right? So I got into it kind of in the middle where there was nothing happening, right? And I think what it comes down to, honestly, is when I was a little kid, I was living in Saudi Arabia, and at the school that I went to, my elementary school, they had a whole series of books about classic movie monsters. So you had Frankenstein and Dracula and Godzilla and King Kong. And I loved King Kong when I was a kid. And so I would check out this book all the time. And so it had the whole story of the original 1930s King Kong. And there was a little thing at the end about kind of movies that were in the vein of King Kong, and one of them was Planet of the Apes, the original, the 60s one. And so I saw the pictures of, it was one of the pictures that I remember is Charlton Heston in the litter, after the hunt being carried away.
Yeah.
I was like, that's interesting, And then on TV in Saudi Arabia, they used to show a series. It was like a behind the scenes of 20th Century Fox movies series called That's Hollywood. And each episode had a different subject. So you had musicals and fantasy and sci-fi, and I remember it was narrated by Tom Bosley, Mr. Cunningham. I remember his voice so distinctly. And so one of them, there was a thing about Planet of the Apes. It just showed a little clip of it, and it was just so fascinating to me. So it was always in my mind. And then in 1987, they showed on Saudi TV. They showed the animated TV series. There was a Planet of the Apes cartoon show. Yeah. And so I bet
a lot of people don't know that too. Probably don't know that there was an old animated series.
Isn't that funny? And so I watched that, and I was 8 years old, and I was just pulled in. I just love the whole concept, and I've always loved the concept because it's exciting because it's like this adventure thing, but it's also scary, right? It's scary to be you're hunted by apes, and you're especially when you're a little kid, it's very on a visceral level, it's scary. And so I tracked down the film, which is very hard to find in Saudi Arabia. But I got a hold of the first one and the third one, and that was it, man. I was probably 10 years old when I saw it the first time, and I just watched it again and again and again.
That's a good age too to really take hold.
It was a perfect age because I became super into it, and back then. I always say this, like when we moved back to the States in '92, everything is so easy to find now, right? If you're looking for a movie, you can find it.
Yeah,
just get online, like you'll find it
anywhere. Yeah.
And back then it wasn't like that. So like the watching all 5 Planet of the Apes movies was a quest that took me about 5 years.
Wow.
Trying to go from one video store to the next because they just didn't have them, And so I affiliate that all with my childhood. And when I was in high school, I actually started a fanzine, an Apes fanzine, and I would print it up myself. I would do all the articles and I would do all this stuff, which, man, you talk about, that's how you get girls to go out with you, is you say, hey, the Apes fanzine. Where you going?
I got my Apes fanzine if you need a copy.
But you know what's funny? I'll tell you, I still have, I did it for about a year and a half. I did like 6-7 issues of that. And in 2014, I had the opportunity to get invited to the world premiere of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Oh, wow.
Which was, and that was in cool. San Francisco, right? And then the day after, I was at the press day, and I met Matt Reeves, and I showed him my Planet of the Apes fanzine.
Oh, no way,
and
that's
he's like
awesome.
Flipping through. He's like, oh, I remember this, and he's flipping through it, and I'm like, if I could tell, like, sophomore Zaki, like, one day the director of Planet of the Apes is going to be looking through this thing and just shooting the shit with you. I mean, what amazing,
That's awesome. That's so cool. That's a great story. Yeah. So do you love the new series, the Rise, Dawn, like,
That's great.
In terms of how it compares to the original films? Do you feel like they kind of exist on their own, like, plane of creativity, or do they feel connected to you, or are you able to kind of separate them?
Well, I mean, they are very much a reboot series, and so they exist off to one side. But I think they capture the important thematic elements, which lets them sit together. I mean, one thing I tend to say is when you take just that 1968 original, the Charlton Heston one, the beauty of it is that you can look at that as the beginning point of those original 5 films, or you can look at it as the end point of these new 3 films. I think it fits either way, know? And people often say, oh, they should go and remake that 60s one. And I'm like, why? Like, you've done it. It exists, and you've got so much more story available to you between where the last Caesar movie ended and where that original movie starts. You got like 2,000 years. Tell more stories.
Well, that's a good segue before we get started. But before we do, Zaki, where can people find you? Where can they track you down and follow you, or continue to listen, watch, etc.?
You can always find me on Twitter. That's at Zaki's Corner, ZAKIS Corner. And that's also my website, if you just add a .com to that. And, of course, my podcast is the Movie Film Podcast, which I co-host with our mutual friend Brian Hall. And we talk news and reviews about all the latest releases, and we do commentary tracks very similar to this. And I also have another show called the Nostalgia Theater Podcast, where I interview writers, actors, directors, and other filmmakers about the shows and films that they've made in years past. So any of those, if you go to iTunes and type in Movie Film Podcast, both of those will come up.
The Nostalgia Podcast has done exceptional. Like, you've had some great guests.
Thank you.
On that show. For real, for anybody that's listening, if you're interested, especially, and again, it's nostalgia, if you're right around our age, if you're in your late 30s, early 40s, that show is definitely one where you could dive in, and there's like so many topics that you cover too. Like, I find that fascinating. Like, there's like such a huge amount. So there's lots to go back to. So if you guys are interested in that,
and the nice thing about I appreciate that, and the nice thing about that show is that for the most part, it's timeless. It's not specifically, So I mean, it's just, hey, looking back at this thing, and it works out really well.
Yeah, awesome. And then, of course, for me, you can find me here at the Arctic Ninja Network. You can find me, Arctic Ninja Paul, on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram. And then also I have my Arctic Ninja Design shop on Etsy. So you can get all types of cool shirts that I make. and that helps to support me in all these endeavors. So your business is much appreciated, and hopefully you find something cool that you can wear on your body. That's the whole point, and to make some money, of course. So with that, we are going to dive into 2001's Planet of the Apes, directed by Tim Burton. And we're going to see what happens here. So, Zaki, are you prepared to take this journey again?
Let's do this.
Let's do this. Okay, so I'm going to give us a little countdown here. For you at home, I'll have a countdown on the screen as well. So we're going to start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, play. So here we go. I got the 20th Century Fox logo going. I'm going to crank my audio down a little bit. Here we go.
Speaking of nostalgia, just
Fox.
looking at that logo.
Right, I was just going to say that. I already miss it. I really do.
Yeah.
Like, just seeing that logo is, it's a shame.
I'm glad that the original Star Wars films, that Disney has put the Fox logo back in front of them. If you watch them on streaming.
Oh, really?
So those first 6 movies, they put the Fox logo back on, and I'm glad they did that.
I mean, it's kind of part and parcel with it, right?
It's part of that experience, yeah.
I mean, like when you saw it in theaters, everybody starts clapping, like for a new Star Wars movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you see that 20th Century Fox thing, and they're just like, yay!
Speaking of clapping, I remember seeing this opening night, and as soon as Mark Wahlberg's name came up, people started wildly applauding, which I found
really
interesting. That's a true story. Yeah, opening night at the AMC. Was it Cantera? That's
really?
Right. Yeah.
So
people cheered for. People did not cheer at the end. I can attest to that.
People are like, huh?
they
people like turned into monkeys. They're like, oh, oh, oh,
yeah.
Oh.
It was a very silent shuffle out of the theater afterwards, but there was a lot of excitement when it opened. I remember that.
I will say this, and I will just say this off the top. Really, I like this movie. It's not a classic. I won't even say that it's a great movie, but yet I still like it. And I really like Danny Elfman's score for this. It's very different than anything he's done for any of Burton's other films. And I've heard it used in trailers and stuff like that before too. But it's actually a really great score. That's if you don't care for the movie, you could listen to it on its own and still get some enjoyment out of it. Now, I don't remember Armor in the original films. Was Armor a part of the apes in like the originals? Like they didn't wear any kind of they had costumes, but they didn't wear armor. They didn't. Yeah, the ape society in the original films is slightly more advanced than what we see here, where they have guns and things like that, and it's more something akin to like maybe the late 19th century, mid to late 19th century human society, roughly. Whereas they're more like barbaric in this. The General Thade character is played by Tim Roth. There's no real parallel to him, because in the original films there's a clear demarcation. So you have the chimpanzees are the pacifists, they're the scientists, the orangutans are the bureaucrats, and the gorillas are the blue collar. They're the soldiers, and they do the monkey hard work,
so to speak.
The monkey work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas in this film, I think this was a Burton thing. He was like, well, chimpanzees are the most friggin' crazy of all the apes. So
they eat people's faces.
That's what I'm saying, right? What we know about chimps now is more accurately reflected in this film, and that was Tim Burton. Like, I think chimpanzees are scary, so I want the main bad guy to be a chimp, which is how we ended up with
this super villain right here.
Terrifying.
It's funny. Anytime I see, you hear those horror stories, and I've seen those horror stories of like people that get attacked by chimps and get their faces eaten and all this other stuff. But then you see like videos of like chimps, like look at this cute little guy, and then you see him like running up to people and hugging them, and they just look so innocent. And I'm like, you better be careful. He will eat your face.
I mean, it's like they reach a certain age, and then they're just not as docile as they used to be.
Yeah. And there he is, the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Wahlberg. One of my worst interviews ever.
Oh, is that right?
It wasn't terrible. It was like they gave you, I mean, you know this because you've interviewed countless celebrities, same as me. And, you know, you get, if you're doing a junket, you got like 4 minutes with somebody, right? And you got somebody that gives you the countdown. And so they're like, okay, ready when you are. And I start talking, and I'm talking to Mark Wahlberg, and he's sitting in his chair. This was for Deepwater Horizon. And he's on his phone, like texting. And I'm like, they're like, your time is running. And he's like, and then he like puts his phone away, and he's like, okay. And like, we'd already burned through like a minute of my time. And I was just like, oh no, really? Come on. So I say it's the worst. Like, he was fine talking to him afterwards, but yeah, you could just tell he was not really there for it. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
I mean, that's these junkets in general. And I mean, this is, I can't really talk about this with anybody else who hasn't experienced it. It's just, these are people who are in a room. People are just going in and out, asking them the same questions again.
It's speed dating. It's speed dating. That's what I call it. It's speed dating. That's all it is. You got 4 minutes. You got 4 minutes to enter a room, make an impression, read the room, and then hope that, you know, and get situated. You know, you think, oh, you could just sit down and be comfortable anywhere. You know, like typically when you sit down, you got to shuffle around. You got to get comfortable. That's not the case. You sit in these awful chairs and you're just like, oh God. And then you're like all scrunched up and you're like, oh, this is what I look like on camera because, you know, you're like, what the hell? You know, and it's like, it's just all happens very fast. But, you know, that's where, you know, you tend to say, you know, to people, I'm like, this is not something just anybody can do, at least not do well. Because you've got to be able to do all of those things, enter the room, make an impression, read the room, ask your questions, get comfortable, look good on camera, at least or presentable, and make that happen. It's a tricky thing. But, you know, with Wahlberg, he was, you know, nice enough guy, but just like kind of pissed me off that he was like texting while I was trying to ask questions.
It's, you know, what's funny is I always think of, and I'm sure you know the Bruce Willis junket interview from, I think it was Red 2.
Oh yeah, where he got mad.
Which to me, that's like the nightmare scenario where you just have somebody who's just completely, he ain't having it at all, you know.
I fortunately
you feel bad for that guy.
Yeah, you do. I fortunately never pissed off a celebrity. I'm just too nice of a guy. So one thing I heard about Wahlberg, and I'd have to do a little more research, and maybe you can back me up on this, but I had heard that when he was hired, which apparently he took the job after a 5-minute interview with Tim Burton, like 5 minutes, and he was like, I'm in. I just want to do a Tim Burton movie.
Tim Burton, yeah.
But I guess he went and like started lifting weights like crazy and showed up like huge, bulked up. And they were like, you need to, you got to tone that down because you look like a superhero. I always think of that story when I think of this movie of like Mark Wahlberg, I'm going to be in Planet of the Apes.
Gotta go get in my loincloth.
Yeah. Well, and apparently he didn't want to wear a loincloth. Like, because he's like, no, I don't want people to think about me as like the underwear model. So
yeah. Well, I mean, for Wahlberg, this was his first big kind of blockbuster.
Yeah, it's true.
Movie, right? So you get, I mean, obviously the pressure was on. And what's funny is this movie, it's the story of all the people who turned stuff down, right? Because you know, they'd offered it to Matt Damon before this, and he did Bourne, and it's a shame that didn't work out for him. and then Tim Roth chose this movie over playing Snape in the Harry Potter movies.
Yeah. Well, and then Wahlberg was going to be in the Ocean's 11 movie. And then he turned that down to do this. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff.
Ships of the night.
Yeah. For real. That's so funny.
The production design is terrific in this movie. I mean, the special effects, the makeup effects, there is a lot. Like I can't say I like this movie, but I appreciate a lot of what they did. I mean, the visuals hold up really well. The Rick Baker's ape effects are amazing. They're still great.
The effects, and I think that as we get into it, the characters within the film, like everybody looks great, and they play their roles very well. Like everybody's like, all the actors were very invested in playing these ape characters. I think ultimately where this movie suffers the most is in the story. It's in the narrative.
Yeah.
But I think production wise, even under a very rushed schedule, as has been commonly, brought up with this film, they still managed to pull it off. And actually, I was talking to my son today before I was getting ready to do this, because I was like, "Hey, you got to do your school, and I'm gonna do this commentary." And he's like, "Well, how long is it?" And I was like, I was thinking about how they always talk about how it was rushed and it was like they didn't get to do all the stuff they wanted to do, and they still managed to pull out a 2-hour movie. So there's something to be said for that too. So it's not a complete. I don't think this movie is a disaster at all. It's just not the best Apes reboot, which I guess ultimately, I don't know if you would call Rise the Rise and Dawn series a reboot per se, more like a prequel imagining something.
It's a reboot of the franchise, if nothing else. It's getting it started again.
Yeah. So I think we can agree on that. So it's like just a kickoff of the Apes, reintroduction of the Apes into the zeitgeist, and this one just didn't launch. But Wahlberg has gone. He's been vocal about, it just wasn't very good and all that other stuff. And I always think it's like, well, it's not terrible, Yeah. If, in truth, I think if you had a different lead, I think it probably could have been something different. I read that Kevin Costner was considered for this, and I was like, how much would Kevin Costner have changed this movie just by the nature of his presence? And also, Kevin Costner is, he's not just an actor that shows up and reads lines. He's a very involved person. So you'd probably have some headbutting there with Tim Burton, but you'd probably still have a better movie in the long run.
I think so. I think the real issue to me, and I rewatched the '68 movie just last week. I mean, I watch it all the time, but what really you get a sense of in that movie is that it rests entirely on Chuck Heston, not only as an actor but as a persona. And so much. I mean, the guy was just charismatic, and he was able to carry this entire film. And he has a journey. The character Taylor has a journey that makes sense, which is, here's a guy who's so fed up with humanity, he leaves the earth because he's like, there's got to be something better than man, and then he ends up back on earth and he has to defend man. That's the irony, and that's something rich, Whereas here it's he's trying to get his monkey back. Like that's Leo's arc. And that's less interesting,
Hey, I'm here to get my monkey back. I shouldn't have taken my monkey. Never send a monkey to do a man's job. I mean, I love that that's a line in the movie that made it in. It's still there.
I think this movie is what I base my Mark Wahlberg impression on, which is just, what the hell's going on? What the hell's happening here? Who tells these monkeys how to talk?
What's happening?
Yeah, it's a lot of that. The other thing, what we have, it's impossible. On the one hand, it's like, well, you can't compare it to the other one because it's its own thing. Okay, that's fair. On the other hand, this is attempting to do a version of that story, down to many of the same beats. So you can't help but compare. And in the earlier film, you're talking about a solid half hour, 40 minutes before we see the apes, because it's all build up and it's all investing in that reveal. And here, it's kind of like we hit fast forward on it, because it's like, well, no, we gotta, come on, people showed up to see a Planet of Apes. We gotta get to it. And I think that's a shame, because what we see here, he crashes, and within a minute or two from now, we're gonna be right into the hunt. And it's just, it's moving at a pace that I think it would have made sense to just give the whole thing a little bit more breathing room and really set up the mood. And
it's interesting too that this takes place on literally an ape planet. It's not Earth. It's a totally different planet. Whereas the original films it was Earth. It was just set in the future. Another thing to note too is, as the Apes property kind of sat in limbo for what, 2-3 decades before they did this, before they did anything else.
About 25 years.
So, there was a lot of exploration from Fox to to get the apes back out there, but there was also trepidation because of the success of the prior films. But like a lot of filmmakers were courted to do this, from Spielberg to James Cameron.
I read Bay, Peter Jackson.
Yeah, that's right. Michael Bay at one point. So you had all these people that were about to do this film, and it ultimately landed in Tim Burton's lap, which I think is actually, if you had said prior to this film, prior to it being made, like, oh, Tim Burton's gonna do it, I'd be like, oh, that'd be pretty cool. But that said, as much as I do enjoy this film, it doesn't feel 100% Burton. I feel like this is restrained Tim Burton. This is studio Tim Burton.
This is probably the most studio Tim Burton.
Yeah.
Ever.
I agree. Yeah. I'm trying to think of another one that was like very like, oh, that was directed by Tim Burton. But I can't, because all of his other films have a very distinct signature. This Apes doesn't have any kind of, I can't think of a single Burtonism, like those little spiry things at some point, don't show up. Like, it's got great characters in terms of the actors playing the apes, but it doesn't have like that kind of the oddity that typically follows a Tim Burton movie.
I mean, arguably, there's a moment with Lisa Marie. His time where she's doing like a mating dance. That's probably the most Burton part. You got Glenn Shaddix in here. That's a very Tim Burton part of it. And
apparently he wanted to have Paul Rubens, Pee Wee Herman, play a part, and it just didn't happen. But could you imagine a Pee Wee ape in this movie? That would be so awesome.
I could see him as the Paul Giamatti character.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to give up Paul Giamatti. He's really freaky looking in this too. So here we have apes collecting up humans.
See, my problem with the humans in this is that they're too pretty.
Yeah, they don't look dirty enough. They really don't. Even their loincloths look nicely pressed.
Yeah, and I mean, Estella Warren's got like lipstick on and all this other stuff.
I remember when she was going to be like the next big. She was going to be like the next big, like, pretty actress star. But I think the only thing I ever saw her in other than this was Driven.
Yep.
I can't think of anything else, but yeah, I guess.
I was about to say 2001 was the start and end of Warren's big screen career.
The Estella Warren Renaissance.
That's right.
It happened in 1 year.
The Estella-sance.
Yeah, look at her. She does it. She got like makeup on, looking all pretty. No hair in her face.
See, this hunt sequence that we're watching, I think to me, this gets to my just issue with Burton's approach, right? Because Burton talked about it in an interview. He's like, I like the original film, but I didn't like how the apes don't act like apes. They act too human. And so that's why we see this hunt sequence where they're swinging and screaming and doing all this. And I'm kind of like, well, Tim, that's the whole point. They act like people. That's what makes it unnerving, that they're not acting like apes, right? So it feel in hindsight, because as you say, I think when you hear it initially, you're like, oh, okay, I could see that working. I think in hindsight, it was just a mismatch between the director and the material.
I could see though why he'd want to have like them jumping around or using their kind of natural ability.
Yeah.
I could see that, I think that could be because it works to their benefit it also shows how they can kind of dominate the human race because they, they're basically like superpowered, like a real chimpanzee is.
So that makes sense given the context of this film, which is it's another planet where the apes have taken over. Whereas if, the whole conceit of the original films is, well, we screwed up our own planet and the animals took over. And so
it changes everything.
It changes everything, exactly.
Michael Clarke Duncan.
So this right here, this is the first of a few nods to the original movie where he says, "Take your stinking paws off me,"
which was originally delivered by Charlton Heston in the original film. It's probably one of the most famous lines in movie history. So I think this is cool. Like, this is kind of Burton-esque. I really think the ape city is really cool. I'll say though, we never really see that I can remember. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. I don't remember it. But we never see where the humans actually live in terms of like a village or a home or anything like that. I feel like that would have given us a little more, insight into the dynamic of what's going on this planet. But we never really get that. We just kind of see them running around the forest.
That's true.
Unless, I just don't recall seeing
No, you're right.
any kind of like, not even a cave where they're all dwelling. And you never really, I don't think you ever hear like, their kind of plight. It's more like they are just cattle roaming in a field, right? Like that's kind of the impression I get.
And that's a problem.
That's Rick Baker right there smoking the pipe.
He is. Yeah. Yeah, in the earlier incarnations of this movie, before this version, Stan Winston was going to do the ape effects, and he dropped out. But obviously, Rick Baker, you can't go wrong with that. I mean, this is
awesome.
This may be one of the last great practical makeup effects movies ever made, because we started shifting to digital makeup very quickly after this.
Yeah, for sure. And that's always, to me, was always the magic of like an Apes style movie, is to see that makeup. But then you have the new Apes films, and you have like Andy Serkis delivering, just an amazing mocap performance. And it's hard to say, oh, this is blasphemous because he's not wearing all the makeup, because he does such an amazing job. And a lot of the actors in the new films do. They just give performances. You're like, wow, this is great.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Zahn in the last one, like, it's a fully fledged character.
Bad
it's amazing. Bad Ape, that's right.
Yeah, I remember.
So this was the movie Helena Bonham Carter met Tim Burton. I think it was on this movie, right? And that's where they...
Yeah, imagine you fall in love with Helena Bonham Carter during Planet of the Apes. Like, does Burton have like some kind of weird ape fetish we don't know about? Because he's like...
He's like, wear the mask.
Oh, damn, you looking good, monkey woman. There's Paul Giamatti, always great. Love Paul Giamatti. He's so awesome.
Remember, our friend Sean has this really bizarre hatred for Paul Giamatti, which I always find amusing. Yeah,
why?
It's like, I don't know. That's one of my distinct memories, is that whenever Paul Giamatti shows up, he gets annoyed. So we love you, Paul Giamatti.
I love American Splendor is like just a gem of a movie. I revisit all the time. I love that movie.
First time I saw him, he played. He was Pig Vomit in Private Parts.
That's right. He's that Scream. I think that was the one that really launched him too.
Yeah,
was that like they were like, oh man, this guy's great.
Yeah, he was in The Negotiator a couple of years after that too. He was really good in that.
And then he was the villain in Shoot 'Em Up.
That I have not seen.
Oh, you haven't? With Clive Owen? Really? I feel like you would be like on top of that one. It's like,
yeah, that one just kind of missed me. Yeah.
It's, you know what? You would probably have a blast with it if you if you went to go revisit it. It's just this over the top, like R-rated action movie that literally lives up to the title of Shoot 'Em Up. It's just like crazy shooting stuff. I should revisit it too. It's really fun. It's been a while, but it's good. And Paul Giamatti is great as the villain.
I'll have to check that out.
This is this ape masked up? Is it, we have coronavirus going on here? What's going on? They don't want to catch. Isn't that something where they don't want to catch human diseases or something like that, and they wear masks?
They don't say it, but
because this, why is that gorilla wearing a mask? I'm just curious. He's masked up.
There's a lot of aspects of ape culture that are just alluded to, and they don't really explain. But I mean, they did a good job of the world building within the film.
Yeah.
I think Tim Roth is so good in this. I mean, he is
truly, he is the standout of this movie. Without question, Tim Roth is the star performer of this movie. Great stuff again from Paul Giamatti and like the supporting apes and Michael Clarke Duncan, Cary Tagawa. But Tim Roth just shines in this.
You can tell he was having a blast.
He's great. And like just his expressions, like he looks like a scary villain.
Yeah.
Just awesome. Got the movements down.
And I think, I mean, Rick Baker, the way in which he designed these appliances where, I mean, you forget that it's makeup.
Yeah. Yeah, you really do. Or, you find yourself looking at it and you're like, to me, I think a great effect is when you're like, how did they do that? Like that's
Right.
when you know it's working, because your mind is trying to figure it out, because you're trying to rationalize it so that it's like trying to figure out a magic trick, right? You're like, oh, so that's how they got the card there. But you can't figure it out. You're just like, I don't know, but they did it. It's awesome. Aw, get yourself a little pet blonde girl. They make great pets. Look at her. You have to house train her. Take good care of her. I have a pretty new collar.
You have to imagine that Rick Baker was probably inspired by the work that John Chambers did on those original movies. So
I can't imagine he wasn't. I mean, Rick Baker's very much like he's an old school guy. He's actually a great follow on Instagram. He posts all kinds of makeup stuff all the time. Like that's all he posts. It's great stuff. But you can just tell, you see his passion. He's actually an amazing painter too. I had no idea he did a time lapse painting on Instagram, and I was like, holy shit, Rick Baker can paint.
Wow.
Like it's pretty amazing. So yeah, I mean, just, a treasure, a true treasure.
Yeah.
For the Hollywood
well, he's got the time
scene.
to paint, right? Since he's basically retired.
Yeah, right. Yeah, get the pretty one. Find out if she's got any lipstick on her.
I'm serious. Like I'm having a flashback to like all the Maxim photos or whatever that Estella Warren did. Right?
Yeah. Nope, she's been
Speaking of
branded
retired,
down.
Kris Kristofferson, he's another guy who just a couple months ago announced he's retired.
Did he? Wasn't he like 100 years old?
He's up there, yeah. So
I love Kristofferson.
I respect these performers who are like, I'm done. Like there's something like Gene Hackman. How he's like,
Gene Hackman's out there on the ranch. I'm gonna write some Western books, and
he's like, I don't need to do this. I'm done.
I'm good.
Connery was like that too.
Yeah. Well, I feel like Nicholson is in that realm now too. He's like, I'm just gonna eat cheese fries at the basketball game and gain 200 pounds, and that's it. I've done my part.
I mean, what is the last movie Jack Nicholson did? Right, I'm having a hard time remembering.
Was it the Departed? I think it was The Departed. I don't remember anything after The Departed, but he might have. But I know he was going to do a remake at one point of, what was it, a French comedy? God, I can't think of the name now. It was like a big or maybe Dutch comedy. And that just fell through. It just didn't happen. But what's the incentive to come back, for Nicholson?
Right.
Like after everything he's done, like since the 60s, like, that's a long career. To like, hey, let me give you like my Twilight years to another movie.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you can certainly respect certain actors who continue to do good work right up until the end. Mm-hmm. That the work itself, like Clint Eastwood, who's still making movies.
Eastwood will die on a set, and God bless him.
And he's still making many good movies. Some are less good than others, but he's still doing it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you can't
a movie a year.
Yeah, you can't discount him, because then you're like, oh, he's just making because for a while there he was making some kind of like schlocky thrillers like Blood Work and stuff like that.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he pulls out $1 Million Baby, or a Sully, and you're just like, whoa, like Clint Eastwood still got it. Like he's not that he ever really lost it, but it was like he had highs and lows, and but yeah, he's just never stopped. Same like with Robert Altman, like that dude worked till he died. He was like, I'm just gonna keep making movies till I'm dead.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's to me that's it's we're talking about Bruce Willis, right? And I'm kind of like, you look at Bruce Willis with a lot of the stuff he's doing, and you're like, come on, man, don't. It just
he is just cashing in. That's what Bruce is doing. Bruce is just like, they pay me $1 million, I show up for like 5 days. It's much better than having to memorize a bunch of lines and listen to a director tell me stuff.
I mean, that if Bruce Willis had like just, after Die Hard 5, just been like, okay, I'm not making any more movies, people would be like longing for Bruce Willis to come back. Like, oh, that was just a fluke, right?
Yeah. Now they're like, please stop making movies.
Yeah. I mean, and I hate to say it,
No, come on. I was like I used to be like one of the biggest Bruce Willis fans, and I'm just like, it's like embarrassing at this point. I'm like, well, but he made good ones. I mean, he's hanging up on my wall right now. Hi, Bruce. But in his heyday. But it's too bad. But Tim Burton continues to make movies, and I'm glad for it. Not all of them are great. I'm trying to think of a Tim Burton movie I hate, and I don't think there's one I hate. There's some I like better than others, but I'm never like, fuck that movie. Even this, it's like I still find joy in this movie. Like it's schlocky. I feel like the sets here look very much like sets, and that's kind of annoying. I feel like they need to be.
I think that's a problem.
Smoked out or something.
I think just in general, the entirety of Ape City feels like a soundstage.
Yeah. There's just no natural. You know what I'm saying? There's no smoke. There's no. I think there's a lack of sunshine and things like that. It doesn't make you feel like you're in an actual environment. It makes you feel like you're on a set, a really cool set, but a set nonetheless.
I think that there's Cary-Hiroyuki Tagawa, by the way. He's great in this.
I love Cary.
We just Brian and I just did a commentary for Mortal Kombat. So just
the original.
Yeah, the 95 one.
The good one.
See, I haven't finished the new one. I'm only about
that tells me everything I need to know right there.
Guess
what? You still got 30 more minutes before anything happens.
It is a lot. There's definitely a lot of training going on. So
you got 30 more minutes of training. So settle in.
I think when we talk about Tim Burton, I mean, I think just in general, he is a soundstage guy. Those are the movies he makes, and he makes these tableaus that are they're Tim Burton stages, Yeah. And so I think a movie like this was always going to be kind of a struggle for him because I think part of what made the original work is that it exists in a quote unquote real world. And so the parts that are off the norm, they're meant to be jarring. Whereas here it's a fantasy world.
Yeah. And with the originals too, I mean, they're shooting in the real world. They're not shooting everything on stage. Some of it is on stage, of course. But you're seeing a lot of the real world stuff too. I distinctly remember, seeing the apes in the sunshine outside, in the jungle. Like you feel like, okay. I think too, the other thing is you don't ever see any sweat. You don't see, and I think those are the kind of things that tend to start missing where they take the organic aspect out of it. So it's, it's a little distracting. Like you just don't see that, there's no gleam to the flesh sometimes. And I think that kind of robs it just a little bit. Otherwise, Rick Baker, you're like, dude, you're a maestro. But, I just feel like, scenes like this, it really does feel like they're on a set. And I don't know if it's the overhead lighting or what. I think that's what it is, actually. I think it's lit too bright.
A little bit flat.
Yeah. And that just kind of, flattens things out. But there's the late great Glenn Shaddix with Lisa Marie.
His voice is so distinctive.
He was great. I mean, if you've ever seen, I'm sure anybody watching or listening has seen Beetlejuice, and to me that's ultimate Glenn Shaddix. That and Demolition Man.
Oh right, that's right. I forgot about him in that. That's right. In a sense, bow
your heads.
I remember that from that was in the teaser.
Yeah. I always think of that line. Sorry, you were saying that line snuck up.
No, I was just thinking about how you can draw a corollary between the original movie's approach to this universe and Tim Burton's approach. And when you look at, for example, how Burton approached Batman versus how Christopher Nolan approached Batman, and that's not meant to be one is better than the other, but it's a different approach, right?
Yeah.
Nolan is we're going to make Gotham City completely realistic and drop these fantasy elements in and see how that works, right? Whereas Burton is in order for me to believe Batman exists, the world he exists in has to be just as kind of weird and bizarre as him, right? And so it's just these two very different approaches. Again, that's not meant to say one is better or worse. I remember that too. Is there a soul in there? That was in that was in the full trailer.
It's a pretty intense moment. I think it's really cool. It's
little
moments like that. You're like, oh, that's again, that's a credit to Tim Roth and his performance. It really makes that come together. And apparently Tim Roth, went to Burton and was like, hey, can I rewrite some of this dialogue to make it more menacing and to make it, a little more evil? And Burton apparently encouraged it. So, again, credit to Roth for just bringing it.
And that's the one of the best elements of the movie is just, for me, it's a very un-Roth like performance because he plays villains, but he tends to be a little more calculating and not as sort of crazy, so you can tell he had fun cutting loose.
I think the other time he was a villain was Rob Roy.
Yeah, he's so good, man.
And he was pretty dubious in that one.
Yeah.
But I can't think of
Rob
any
Roy,
other ones.
That is a movie that I feel like nobody talks about it, but it's so good.
It is tremendous.
Because that was the same year as Braveheart, right? Or it was like within. It was
after Braveheart, so it had that kind of like, oh, well, you're not going to be as good as Braveheart, and it's not, but it's still very good.
Right.
And you have some great performances from Liam Neeson and Tim Roth and Jessica Lange, right? Jessica Lange. Is it Jessica Lange? Right. Yeah, Jessica Lange. And there's that hot-looking Helena Bonham Carter. Got Tim Burton all juiced up. Tim Burton, in many ways, he's kind of like the geek fantasy in a way. It's like for men, trying to score the hot chick, right? Like, he's with Lisa Marie and Helena Bonham Carter, and now Ava Green. Like,
I didn't know about.
There's
Ava
hope
Green,
for you geeks out there. Tim Burton's just out there scooping. He gets his muses, right? Like he's very much a that kind of guy. He's like, you're my muse, but the rub to that is typically that muse is not a lifetime muse. It's a short-lived one.
Yeah, right.
Or even a long one. It could be a decade, but either way, it's kind of like you're getting replaced one day.
There's an expiration date.
You seem like you'll inspire me for 3 or 4 movies. But I mean, when you got Ava Green walking in, that's tough.
Yeah.
I interviewed her once. She is a magnificent, magnificent person.
Really?
She's very, very tall. Very tall. I was like, holy shit. Is she gonna knock me over?
That's not terribly surprising.
Like supermodel, like tall,
Yeah,
but, super nice, super sweet, and just absolutely stunning. Beautiful, beautiful woman. So it's easy to see, Tim Burton. I think this happens to a lot of filmmakers out there. They're just, you hear about it all the time. These, on-set romance things. It's like, you're constantly ushered in with, people that are chosen for those qualities, right? And to be around them. And you're like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. So this here, in terms of the structure of the story, this is interesting in that we're establishing that he knows more about humans than he's letting on. Right? And there's this underlying sense of not letting it get out what humans are capable of, and that's very similar to a through line in the first film.
And which is, it's a good challenge moment here too, because, just before he was making a scene of how, opening Wahlberg's mouth and doing the whole, is there a soul in their line?
Yeah.
And it challenges who Thade is, because
that's right.
He doesn't want to believe that there's a soul in there. That's how he really wants to feel. Yet he's, confronted with this. So you can kind of see where it's easy to say, oh, he's just, a menacing villain. But, there is actually some thought and care that went into his story, which is to say that his worldview is being upended.
Yeah.
Which tends to happen. If you could link it to, slavery in America, slavery in any other European country, where, your captors are forced to reconcile that, these are human beings that you're dealing with, not empty.
It's a total paradigm shift from what they're used to.
Yep.
Right? Well, in the original film, I mean, I've said in the past that the character Dr. Zaius, who's kind of the antagonist in that movie, I mean, he's the hero of his story, right? And that's the best villain is you look at it from their point of view and you're like, okay, I get it. right? Because he's like, hey man, this is my world, and you're showing up and you're kind of screwing everything up.
Yeah.
And you understand that.
Well, and it's like recently, I don't know, I'm sure you saw Godzilla versus Kong. When Damian Bichir's character is supposed to be a villain because he drinks whiskey and he puts a jacket over his shoulders, but
and he has
in the
accent.
end, he's trying to like save humanity from these monsters that are killing millions of people like day by day. And I'm kind of like, is he the villain?
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that. He's actually trying to make a robot that will protect us and kill monsters. In a realistic sense, I feel like everybody would be like, give this guy all the money, give him whatever he needs.
In the movie world, we're like, but
in movie world, Godzilla. But look at him, he's drinking that whiskey. You know he's evil. Look at how he drinks it. He has a little smile on his face. You're evil. And here comes Zaki's favorite scene.
Oh yeah, quite a thing. You know what's funny? If I were to guess, that opening night crowd, I think that right there might have been the moment that they lost the audience. And
yet, I can see how the producers and Burton and everybody were just having a ball with that scene, and they're like, "Oh, it's great!
Oh, yeah.
Like we have to keep it in there."
See, I actually like this whole sequence where they're running through Ape City and we see these little
you get to see their lives and it's interesting. I think it's a smart approach.
I mean, it is the most Burton-y part of the whole movie is all that, like the ape with the toupee and all that stuff.
And taking his teeth out.
Yeah, I mean it
so
feels
funny.
like he was the most engaged doing this stuff.
And like I love this scene.
Right
this is great.
Like it's creepy,
It's it's like
tears.
It's creepy. It's, terrifying. It's, you can equate it politically if you want, again, however you want to do it, but it's just a fascinating look, as long as it makes you feel something.
That's right.
Don't take my pet. And even in that context, you see the girl ape. I kind of feel bad for her. I'm like, she doesn't know any better. Like
right.
I don't want her to get killed or anything. I'm just like, she doesn't deserve that. Like, it's just a product of her environment,
Yeah. See, it was an interesting choice that they made in this to make the humans a subjugated class as opposed to being just animals.
Yeah. And apparently that was, Burton kind of rejected the whole like, oh, humans have lost their ability to talk thing. He was like, no, they're still going to talk. But, I think the conundrum with that is that if humans could talk and they're talking on the same level and they sound as intelligent as apes, I feel like they would have already found a point where they were both communicating with each other. Just by the nature of communication itself, because they can communicate, and they're speaking the same language. That I feel like there would be a lot more compromise as far as that goes.
That's the basic problem is that if a dog comes up to you and he's like, "Hey, what's up, man?"
I'd be
you wouldn't be like, "Hey, go sleep outside." And
exactly.
Like something fundamentally changes. I think that's an issue because if you want to talk about it in terms of racism and you want to make it a racism parallel, that's fine, but there's a disconnect because of, as you're saying, they seem to be on the same level in terms of how they talk to each other. Like the humans, like Kris Kristofferson is like self-confident, and he, you know what I mean? There isn't the sense of like
he seems like this old, wise, seasoned guy that's like with that's educated.
That's right.
He's not.
I mean, even the Eugene Clarke character, the black guy, like he's empowered. So it's odd to me.
I think it would have sold it. It would have sold it better if they were somehow had lost their humanity, like in the original films. If they had some type of thing where they were just not as evolved as they are ultimately. Right. They feel they feel too smart. Not only to be running away, but you feel like they would have even outmaneuvered some of the apes at this point, or tricked them or duped them or, somehow worked their way back into society. in some way. And if they're that smart, again, this is why I think we should have seen or should see where they live, because if they're that wise and they can do all this stuff, you feel like they would have already made some type of fortification, some type of home base, and some type of society. You know, I just don't believe that people that are communicating at this level would just be running around the jungle living as nomads, you know.
Well, and especially because, you know, what we find out later is that these human beings are the descendants of the scientists and the astronauts who were on the space station. So something like that technology, they would have access to that knowledge and all of that stuff. Like there's a missing piece that they, you know, they sort of glossed over.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
And I think it was truly all in service. I mean, almost out of laziness, like, because Burton just didn't want to deal with people that didn't talk. I feel like that's probably what it was. He was like, ugh, they can't talk. How am I going to have the romance between Mark Wahlberg and Estella Warren and Kris Kristofferson?
Which he wasn't interested in anyway.
Yeah, he
wanted the romance with Helena Bonham Carter.
Yeah.
You know?
Everybody was after Helena for this one. This sexy ape.
You know what I remember is this movie was rushed into production because of an impending writer's strike, which I don't think happened, but they were worried about it happening. And so I wonder if that also plays a role, right? Because this was it came out in 2001, so 2000 is when it went into production. I remember that was a concern.
Yeah. And that's, you know, like the common complaint is that it was rushed.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, what's funny is, I mean, this is all post facto, but Tim Burton, just like, he just wasn't feeling it. I mean, that's what he said multiple times. Like, it's just, you know, and I think another thing that kind of hurt it is that, you know, this is produced by Richard Zanuck, who was a great producer, of course. He was also the head of the studio when he was the head of Fox when the original film he was the guy who greenlit the original Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
So he had a little bit of history. But what's interesting is, you know, in 98, when it was the 30th anniversary of the first film, they put out a documentary where they interviewed all the people involved with all those films. And it's a great documentary that's now kind of like a time capsule because the vast majority of those people are gone now, right?
Yeah.
But they interview Richard Zanuck, and he's like the one guy who's talking about how, you know, I didn't see any social commentary or any political satire or anything. I just thought it was an adventure movie. And I'm like, dude, you can't watch the original Planet of the Apes and not see the social commentary. Just, I mean, it's seeping off of every frame of that film.
Yeah.
And I remember when he became the producer of this, I was like, I think we're going to lose a lot of the sort of the subtext, the interesting stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's mostly the case. I mean, this is just kind of a straightforward adventure movie. And I think if you watch it as that, I think it's fine. But those films are really built on their social commentary. I mean, that's a key element of them.
And Burton, for all the great work that he's done, is not really a social commentary filmmaker. He never has been. Like, he does sneak it in, but nowhere near as overt as you would get with other filmmakers.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he's like a fantasy land guy. Like, that's he creates these fantasy worlds and he drops you into them. I mean, I think he's good at that, you know? Yeah.
And with the new series, you know, that it definitely leans into the social commentary aspects.
Very much so.
Which I think is neat. I think that, you know, that's kind of part and parcel with the Apes franchise, because you're supposed to be drawing parallels. You're supposed to be connecting the dots, and it allows you the freedom to do that ultimately without, like, basically being, you know, kind of slapping people in the face with it. You can kind of, you know, you can do it a little more sneaky, and you can kind of, you know, allow people to absorb it in a way that's entertaining, but also still thought-provoking. So I always felt that was, you know, to me, was a strength of the Apes films. And it allows you that freedom to kind of, you can draw, as you were saying, like, you could call it racism, you could call it however you want to do it. You have those options because the story lends itself to allowing you to do that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when you have the original film end with the Statue of Liberty, and this is arriving in the midst of the Cold War, Vietnam is going on. I mean, you're going to make parallels to our current moment. And that's what enriches that film to me. You know, when I show it in my film classes, I'm like, you have to look at this as an artifact of 60s cinema.
Yeah.
It's reflective of what people were thinking about then. And it tells you something that 50 years later, it still feels relevant. It still feels urgent.
Sure.
And you know, I remember when this film came out, the 2001 movie, Roger Ebert said it in his review. He's like, in 10 years, when people say, let's watch Planet of the Apes, they'll be talking about the original one. And I think that's true. That was borne out, you know?
Yeah.
And it tells you something that exactly 10 years after this was Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which was meant very specifically to harken back to the original movie and not continue this. So his prediction was largely borne out.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of movies that stand as kind of timeless things that you constantly go back to, that no remake, reboot, or anything could ever replace. Like, let's say a decade from now, they remake Back to the Future. There's simply no way. It's just not possible. There's no way that you could replace what that film is, what it means, and the impact that it had. But ultimately, too, all the decisions that were made, from casting to music to shots, everything, you're not going to replace that. You're not going to recapture it. There's just certain movies that you're always going to go back to. You know, the original Planet of the Apes, especially that ending, you know, with Charlton Heston on the beach. I think those are classic, iconic scenes, you know, in cinema history.
You know what's interesting, though, is I've definitely, as I've gotten older, I've gotten much more easygoing when we see some of these sacred cows get revisited. I've gotten to the point where I'm like, well, let them try. If it's good, it'll be good. If it's not good, hey, I've still got my one, and nothing's going to take away, you know? So kind of like, I don't know, like Ghostbusters, the 2016 Ghostbusters, right? Which I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I'm like right in the middle when it comes to that. But I remember saying
I was fine with it. It wasn't like
kind of me.
Yeah, it wasn't great. It wasn't like, oh man.
But how often have you revisited it? Probably not that much.
Never.
Right?
I watched it once.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's what I'm saying. It's like I'm like, well, if it's good, then it'll be a whole new thing that'll exist alongside. If it's not good, well, whatever. The old one is still there. You know.
Yeah. Exactly. And the old one is the one you're going to revisit. You know, and that's ultimately what's going to happen. Yeah, you're going to go back. Like, I don't think anybody's like, hey, I want to watch Total Recall. Guess which one I want to watch?
The 2012 Total Recall.
I'm going to go ahead and wager a guess here. We're not watching the Colin Farrell version.
That's right.
Like, why on earth would you ever choose that version over the Paul Verhoeven version? My mind would just be blown. I'd be like, are you serious?
Yeah, or the you know, the Joel Kinnaman RoboCop, or the, you know, I mean, there's so many examples of movies where it's like, well, it's fine, you did your thing, you tried, but that's the one I'm gonna watch, you know. And I feel like with this Apes in particular, I mean, there was a minute where it irked the crap out of me. I was like, man, they nuked the franchise, they killed it, right? And I think obviously it helps that now they've started their own thing, and it's, you know, they're continuing on with that. So this just kind of exists as its own thing. So I have a less adversarial relationship with this movie.
Yeah. Well, I could see at the time, though. I could see that at the time it would be conflicting for you, you know. And I don't remember. I don't remember your reaction initially when this came out. I don't remember if you hated it or loved it. I can't remember.
You know what's funny is,
or just indifferent.
I was not indifferent. I was trying to convince myself I liked it more than I did. I went through
like, I like it.
You know, like in 1999, everyone went through sort of Phantom Menace syndrome, where you had a whole bunch of people who were really desperate to like that movie, and then gradually it kind of fell off. And now we're at a point where people have come back around to appreciating those prequels.
Crazy thing is, I loved Phantom Menace from the start.
You liked it from the start. I remember that. You liked it because we became friends in summer of '99, so it had just come out, Phantom Menace.
I saw it. I remember I saw it, and then I left the theater, immediately got back in line to go watch it again. And this was back in the day when there were lines in the theater, and it was out the door into the parking lot, and I was like, Well, I guess I'll just go again.
But I'm sure you remember there was a whole period where a bunch of people really liked Phantom Menace and then broke bad on it.
Yeah.
Very shortly thereafter.
Well, listen, Phantom Menace it's not a perfect movie, and I'm not going to try and convince anybody of that. For me, though, and I do think, and you were mentioning, looking at it in retrospect now, as you've had time and distance, I think I appreciate it even more because, I've come to appreciate the new trilogy. It's like, to me, it's just been a sinking ship. And so for me, I look back on the prequels and I'm like, well, at least they were Lucas. At least it was his vision. At least it was like, faithful. And it was a story that was made, a trilogy that was made with a set beginning, middle, and end, rather than a, hey, let's make a trilogy and we're going to have different filmmakers just do whatever the hell they want. And then we'll have no story with no preconceived ending. It's like, was that the best idea? Maybe we shouldn't call it a trilogy then, just make movie after movie. This way people won't expect that, right? No, it's a trilogy. You gotta be a trilogy. Okay. And
the prequels, I mean, I've witnessed it firsthand. I've seen the way people sort of come back around to them, but there was definitely that window with the Phantom Menace where for the first 2 weeks, people were really white hot in support of it, and then they started breaking bad. And I didn't have that experience because when I watched it, I had to watch it for the COD paper, so I watched it slightly early, and I was like, I just thought it was okay. I gave it like a B, and people were still climbing all over me because of that. I think it's a fair review. I think that's generous.
I think a B. I think a solid B stands as a good grade for Phantom Menace even today. I think a solid B is good.
I would agree with that. But Planet of the Apes 2001 was the one where I was like, no, it's good. It's good, guys. It's good.
It's good. No,
it's good, guys.
No, it's good.
Here's Charlton Heston, by the way.
There he is, Charlton Heston, now an ape. So apparently, and I read this morning in preparation for this. I didn't know this before, but I guess Tim Roth is a very big anti-gun kind of activist, and actually didn't know that Charlton Heston was going to be in this. Who Charlton Heston, as we all know, is or was rather the kind of the spearhead of the NRA, and so that was a difficult thing for Tim Roth to come to terms with. But I guess in the end, with Burton convincing him basically, hey, it's a movie, it's fiction. And I didn't even piece it together, but in this scene, Charlton Heston is about to give Thade a gun, which is, kind of where, reality and fiction collide. So you have, the head of the NRA giving Thade a gun, which is kind of funny in a way. Everybody has.
But what's funny, dialogue. He's like, that is the key to their destructiveness, and that's why they're terrible. So there's also this.
It's like the irony is just spinning in loops and loops with this scene.
It's going up its own large intestine. The original film, there's this great moment which is made ironic by historical context, where after Charlton Heston escapes, he is freed by his ape allies, and they're kind of like, okay, well, you're free now. And he's like, do you have any guns? And they're like, yeah, but we don't need them. He's like, I want one anyway. And I'm like, that's funny. Now this, if I'm not mistaken, this was Charlton Heston's last acting work before he passed away. If I mean, he was in that Michael Moore movie where Michael Moore just kind of shit all over him, and that pisses me off to this day. Where he showed up at his house and it was just really disrespectful.
Right? I mean, it should come as no surprise to you, I'm not a Michael Moore fan.
That moment in particular in Bowling for Columbine, I just thought it offended me. Just I'm a fan of Charlton Heston, even though I disagree with. It's a pretty
shitty like trap,
Yeah.
It's like, fuck off, man. He's like,
and
like just like an old man at this point, and it's like,
well, and not just that, he had by then already been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So I mean, here's a guy who's losing his faculties. And like, what are you hoping to accomplish here? You know?
Yeah. Like what? Yeah, exactly. I think that's the whole thing. If you're looking at that, it's like, what are you trying to accomplish with this? Because you're not going to get an engagement with this individual that's going to be, that's going to bear any fruit. This is ultimately just something so you can kind of just show up and flip somebody off. That's really all it was. That's all that scene served to do.
And again, Charlton Heston was an intelligent guy. If you have the opportunity to sit down with him and talk about the areas where you disagree, I mean, that's a conversation that would be worth having.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like maybe you're not going to agree at the other end of it, but hey, at least you're getting into something. But when you're like, here's a kid that died, how do you feel about that? Well, that's bullshit. I don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you.
If I'm not mistaken, this was Chuck Heston's last acting role before he passed, and it was pretty much Richard Zanuck like twisted his arm. It was like, you gotta nope.
Please come be an ape.
It was like, you're gonna let us do this as a way of paying homage to you. And actually, I should mention that much earlier in the film, we see Linda Harrison, who played Nova in the first two films. She's one.
And she was a human. Yeah.
That's right.
Well,
she's essentially playing the same role.
Heston did True Lies, and then he also did Any Given Sunday. And I can't remember if Any Given Sunday came. I think it came before this.
2000. That was 2000. You and I watched
that was
together.
A year before. Zaki has a memory about every person he ever saw a movie with, or else he just remembers every movie he saw me with. Because he'll be like, yeah, we saw that together. And I'd be like, did we? I mean, I have a terrible memory of who I saw movies with. So don't be offended, Zaki. I couldn't tell you. I'd be like, I don't know. I saw it. I don't know who I saw it with. The one that I remember us going to for sure, there's quite a few.
Eyes Wide Shut.
There's that one. But was the 13th Warrior. And I remember we were holding all these seats. This is why I remember it.
Yes,
we were holding, because everybody's like, oh yeah, we're coming. We had like 5 people. And this was the back of the day when you had to like try and hold seats. Like you're trying to stretch your jacket across like 5 seats. Like, no, we're holding these seats. And then the people that said they were going to come never came. And there were people that were like, hey, can we sit here? We're like, oh, we're saving the people coming. And they were pissed. And you had all these people that wanted to sit where we were saving these seats. And as soon as the movie started and our friends hadn't showed up, people just scooted on in. And I was like, there's nothing I could do. And I remember it was that moment when I decided I'm never saving seats again. Never again am I ever doing it.
You and me, we were there. We got there. We actually cared to get there on time.
Ugh, such bullshit.
And everyone else was just like, piss off. That was, it was either at the Cantera or at the in Bolingbrook off of Boughton.
I think it was Cantera. I'm almost positive it was Cantera.
You know what?
It was at Bolingbrook. It was at the Bolingbrook one, I think. Fuck, I don't know.
That sounds right to me. Yeah, I know we watched the Thomas Crown Affair, which was that same.
Oh yeah. I went to see Thomas Crown Affair with a couple friends. Obviously, because I'm a huge McTiernan fan, so I was trying to drag everybody to it. It's like, oh, we gotta go see Thomas Crown Affair.
That's another one nobody really talks about.
I still love to this day. When we were talking about 13th Warrior, that's a movie I was disappointed in. And I remember you were disappointed too when we left, but it's actually a movie I absolutely love now. Like, I love the 13th Warrior.
I listen to that soundtrack all the time. I listen to that.
It's a great soundtrack. Have you ever heard the original score by Graham Revell?
No.
It's actually pretty good. Go to YouTube and look up the Graham Revell score for 13th Warrior. That was the original. That was McTiernan's.
Is it better?
I won't say it's better, but it's actually very good. And you can listen to it and you're like, oh wow, that is very interesting. Somewhere out there's a McTiernan cut of this movie of 13th Warrior. I would love to see it. Release the McTiernan cut. Because him and Crichton fought over the movie, and then Crichton had final cut. So the 13th Warrior we have is actually Crichton's final cut of the movie. And and Crichton actually did reshoots while McTiernan was doing reshoots. And then in the end, but Crichton had final cut, so it didn't matter what McTiernan reshot because Crichton had final cut. And McTiernan had a lot of different things, like the female cave chick, whatever, was actually like an uglier, like bigger, like more like the actual totem, rather than for Crichton, he was like, oh, it'll be an attractive woman. for or as attractive as they could be in that. But there was a lot of differences. It's actually it's a fascinating story. But even with all that said, I think 13th Warrior is amazing. And I did not like it when we first saw it. I was very disappointed. But now I love it. I absolutely love it. Some movies just grow on you. They grow and change with you.
And that those reactions are the best ones. I say this all the time about film reviews, where because I to this day will get like angry emails about a film review that I wrote, 10 years ago or something, and I'm like, well, I like it better now. And they're like, well, no, you failed.
You're not allowed to change your mind. Yeah. What is this?
Well, I always say this. I'm like, look, a review is a stick pin in a moment in time. That's all it is. I'm telling you what I thought right after I saw something. Guess what? Yeah. Repeat viewings change, you like movies more or less.
Yeah. I say this all the time. I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what the art of film is. And that film is an art, and one of the things that makes it so amazing is that, again, it grows and changes with you over time. A movie that you saw when you were 10 years old is going to mean something different to you than when you watch it when you're 20, when you're 30, when you're 40, when you're 50. Your life experiences dictate all of this. Your perspective on life, your politics, whether or not you have children, all these different things affect how you feel about movies when you watch them again, because you're watching them from a new enlightened perspective. And this is the beauty of film. It's the beauty of watching a movie and to see how you feel watching something like Planet of the Apes now versus when we originally watched it. I'm seeing this movie, even though I've seen it multiple times before, I'm seeing it with new eyes once again, because I've never watched them at this age, at this time.
Right.
And I probably will watch this movie again at some point. Who knows how I'll feel at that point? I may be like, this is actually a piece of shit. Or I might be like, this is like a fucking cinematic achievement that nobody has ever recognized. Or I may feel the same, which is like, it's a pretty fun, goofy Apes movie. And I feel like
that's kind of the thing. I mean,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just thinking, I mean, before we got on, we were talking a little bit about how people overreact to things on social media. And there's always that, like, hey, I saw this movie and I liked it. Like, that'll be somebody tweet, and then somebody will respond to, well, that's a piece of shit. What's wrong with you? Right?
Yeah, right. Like,
and it's a couple of weeks ago this happened where because I rewatched the Snyder DC movies in the lead up to the Snyder cut of Justice League, and so Man of Steel, I see it. I was like, I still really like this movie. That was my tweet. And somebody who I have no idea who they are, never heard of them, never seen them, they chime in. They're like, and you call yourself a film critic? And I was like,
like it?
Because I liked it. And I mean, because those movies, they produce polarizing reactions either way. So I was like, I kind of click on his profile to see if it's not some sock puppet, and I'm like, it seems like an actual person. So I respond. I'm like, it's kind of a weird way to interact with somebody for the very first time, isn't it?
Yeah.
and to their credit, they were like, you know what? You're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. I was like, wow, okay.
That's like when moments of humanity like break in through the shell of Twitter. You're like, it's like you unlift the veil and you see the person behind the computer and they're like, you motherfucker. And then you like peel back the curtain and you like pop your head in and they're like, oh, hey.
Right.
What's happening? Because like most of the time in Twitter, you're like, you're the Wizard of Oz, right? You're closing your curtain and you're like, I hate you. And then somebody peels back that curtain and you're like, whoa, wait, what? Oh, there's people here.
Yeah.
Twitter's the worst. You and I both know it. And yet we both we are victims and we are perpetrators. We are the worst. We are the worst. I really do. Every day I try to do better. I'm like, I'm going to try and I'm not. And it's true. I bite my tongue till it bleeds so many times because it's gotten to the point now where it's you really have to like weigh, is this worth what's the fallout? Do I even want to say this? And it's just, it's a horrible place to have any kind of true positive engagement. And I don't mean positive in like everybody agrees with you. I just mean where you can have a discourse. Because it's like,
forget it.
It's like you get a bunch of people and you put them in a room like, okay, everybody put your blindfolds on now and start telling us your opinion, because that's ultimately what it becomes. And then you go stand in the middle and they're all going to tell you what they think of what you're saying. And you're just like, oh God.
Well, I love the, I don't know who originated this, but I think it's very apt, where every day Twitter has a main character. And your job is to not be the main character.
It is. Somebody likened it to like every day you log on to Twitter, it's a game of survival. It really is. Like, will you survive today on Twitter?
It's true.
Based on like what you share, say. Like a share is pretty safe. A comment can be okay depending on what you say. And then an actual composed tweet, that's where you're really playing the game. That's where you're really putting it out there.
It's really true.
We'll scrap today. Twitter was a mistake. And I apologize for even being on it, to be honest with you. And there's not a day goes by where I'm like, why don't I just fucking delete this shit? But the truth is, it's where I can reach the most people. And then at the same time, I think, okay, but if I delete it, is that me giving up? And is that taking my voice out of this crowd? And what does that serve by taking my voice out? So it's like, it's a bitter thing that I stick around. But, I do have positive engagements with like a small group of people, and I do like that. But overall, man, it's a war. Twitter is a war.
I think it in a weird way it ties in with what these films are about. The Planet of the Apes films are ultimately about man's inhumanity to man, and sort of our capacity.
Man's inhumanity. That should be a T-shirt. I'm gonna make that. What's going next?
I mean, it's true. I mean, we have a capacity for cruelty, unfortunately. I mean, and
we do.
Obviously, we have a capacity for kindness too. We see both, but these films are meant to be a cynical look at what might happen if we're not careful. Yeah. Right. And that's certainly, I firmly believe that 50 plus years later, that's why those original movies still play. I mean, I've watched all 5 of those original films with my kids, and it's not just because Dad likes them. They're on board. They get it. They get the text, they get the subtext. So it in other words, it continues to play with that audience. I mean, the kid audience.
Do they like them as much as you? Do they have the same affinity?
Them as much as me. they enjoy them, but they enjoy them. Like if I put on Planet of the Apes, they'll watch it.
But it's not like torture. It's not like, oh God, Dad's making us watch Planet of the Apes.
Not at all. Yeah, no, not at all. In fact, because just this past year we watched all 5 of the original ones, and then we went right into the reboot series. And,
oh wow!
And they're on board. I mean, they have and it's funny. I say this all the time. Like even when it comes to Star Wars, I'm so grateful to have my kids' perspective for all of it, because I get to experience it through their eyes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just more easygoing. The prequels, like I'm so glad I have them to bounce the prequels off, because they were a big part of me just like letting go of whatever issues I had. Because I'm like, for them, it's all just one big story. There are no plot holes. Yeah. Anything that seems like a plot hole, they're able to explain it away. Oh, well, that happened because this and whatever bullshit they come up with. I'm like, it's for kids. It's a playground for kids. That's what it should be.
Yeah.
We can enjoy it as adults, but we should enjoy it from the perspective of who it's aimed at, which is a young, like experiencing it for the first time, you know?
Well, and what I find too with kids is that they help you return back to your kid's state, because you can feel what they're feeling and you can see it. Like, I mean, I watched, completely unrelated to this, but I put on From Dusk Till Dawn the other day, just sitting there. Sure. I was like, I'm gonna watch From Dusk Till Dawn, and we were eating dinner and my son sat down and I was like, he's probably not going to care. He's not going to sit around. He's never seen a trailer for it. He knows nothing about it. Nothing. He doesn't know anything about what From Dusk Till Dawn is. And we're watching it and he's getting into the story. He's like, man, like, I wonder if they're going to get away, if they're going to get through Mexico and all this other stuff. And the whole time I'm like, once I see he's invested, I'm like, this is going to be an amazing experience to see when this movie flips completely, like flips genre and everything.
Let me real quick say,
go.
We should be screen specific occasionally, right? Where it says Kalima, which is what they call the forbidden area. We see the sign, it's caution live animals. So I find this interesting. Bill Broyles, who wrote the script, talked about how Kalima, that's actually deliberately meant to evoke the Muslim testament of faith, which is called the Kalima. And It's you know, in the Islamic faith, if you say I believe there is no God but one God and that Muhammad is the messenger of God, you're considered a Muslim. That's called the kalima. And so he deliberately used that word to evoke sort of the idea that this is a spiritual place and it's kind of mysterious. And I found that interesting.
Well, and this movie plays heavily into religious themes. I think it plays more into religious than like socio-political ones. You know, the whole like the Semos, and then like, you know, basically the chimp, you could say he's Jesus or Muhammad, however you want to term it. It doesn't really matter. He's like a chosen one that's coming down from the heavens. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is definitely leans heavier into the religious aspect than kind of the political ones that we've become accustomed to with the Apes franchise.
Right.
And I don't think, man, to my memory, I don't remember Rise, Dawn, or War having any religious implications at all. It definitely felt to me more like it leaned into the socio-political, but then it kind of tackled more into the science. Like, it really leaned into the scientific aspect in terms of how the apes were created.
You can make a reasonable argument that Caesar is a Christ figure, in that, you know, through his death, you know, the apes achieve their own salvation. But I think it's a reach. Like, I think you can get there, but I think it's a longer walk. But I agree with you. I think Bill Broyles had worked out a whole mythology, right? It was called the Chronicles of Ashlar, which is what this planet is called, where he had sort of figured out a before and an after for this movie. Obviously, none of that really got elucidated. Although,
I didn't even know it was called Ashlar.
Isn't that funny? I only know that because, well, first of all, I was obsessively following the production of this movie. I mean, you remember Corona Coming Attractions? Do you remember that website?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist anymore.
Oh my
but
God,
I would go every
hilarious.
day. I'd be checking to see if there were updates, you know. But they did a couple novels, like prequel novels, that showed what happened after this spacecraft, the Oberon, after it crashes. So it shows the distant prehistory of this world. And so they had some ideas to keep. And in fact, you know, Dark Horse did a comic book series set in this world.
Really?
And if I'm not mistaken, it was set in the aftermath of Leo leaving. So it's kind of like what happens after that. And none of that stuff took, you know, and I think that tells you something. I just think people had certain very specific associations with Planet of the Apes, and it wasn't like scratching that itch in the way they would have hoped.
And so, you know, you get to this part here and you're just kind of like, why have none of these humans ever ventured in there and discovered everything that he just unlocked and opened? Right. You figure even just by their intelligence levels, the way they speak and act and behave, they would have ventured into there. Why would this be the first time they're going into that place, you know? Yeah. And this is where, you know, movie logic just... it serves the movie. It doesn't serve reality. So you have to take that into account.
I think that's well said. And I think the problem is, what has Wahlberg done to warrant their loyalty? Like, what has he hasn't done anything that exceptional.
I think he did like 100 push-ups at one point, and that was it. They're like,
well, he's ripped. That? He must know something. He knows how to exercise his upper body. So.
I love making jokes at the expense of Mark Wahlberg. It's my thing. It's my jam. I'm just kidding. I feel like I'm coming off like I don't like Mark Wahlberg. I actually do. I don't love Mark Wahlberg. I think he's kind of wasted his talent. He's actually really great in comedies, and he's a really great dramatic actor. But he keeps trying to do these, like, you know, I don't know, these kind of action-rific roles. And yeah, of course he could do them. He's built for them, but he's actually a pretty talented actor. And I feel like he just doesn't exploit it enough. You know, we had, like, you look back at something like Boogie Nights, you're like, damn. Like, I remember watching it and be like, holy shit, Wahlberg can act.
That was the first time no, actually that's not true, because I didn't see Boogie Nights until later. I saw Three Kings. And that was when I was like, wow, he's pretty good.
Yeah, like he can actually bring it if he wants to. I think a lot of it too has to do with the director pulling it out of him. But he's just like he does stuff like Mile 22. He's good in Deepwater Horizon, but I mean he's done all these Peter Berg movies, and I love Pete Berg, but
those two are joined at the hip.
Pete Berg can be hit and miss too. And I feel like
is he still attached to that $6 Million Man movie? They've been talking about that, right? Weren't the two of them?
Pete Berg, yeah. Originally, Pete Berg was going to do it with Wahlberg, but Pete Berg's no longer attached to it.
Okay.
And I don't know if Wahlberg is actually going to stick to it or not. But I know they had another filmmaker that's already attached to make it, but they're going to have to work their ass off to make something special out of that.
I feel like they might have missed their window on that, because I feel like maybe about 10, 20 years ago would have been the exact time to really get nostalgia. But I'm like, who remembers the $6 Million Man anymore? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think you and I are like the tail end.
And you have like the superhero genre has kind of just eclipsed that at this point, Yeah. You got the super soldier serum. You've got all these other things that have just kind of tackled that, similar thing. So
yeah,
I'm not sure how they do it. I'm not saying they can't, but they got their work cut out for them.
Well, for one thing, you have to call him the $6 billion man, because 6 million ain't nothing.
By the time it comes out, it's going to be the $6 trillion man. Am I right?
$6 trillion.
Right? Oh, shit. Old Cary Tagawa. I love Cary Tagawa, man.
He's another one of the guys. You plug him in, you're going to get something interesting from him.
I've always been a big fan. I actually, in high school, I wrote a short story. It's like a 100-page short story. And it's basically was an action movie. And I called it Hollow Point. Mm-hmm. And I had Cary Tagawa as like the lead villain. Like, he was just in my head. I didn't write his name as Cary Tagawa. That's who you saw in your... But that was like, I totally wrote it as Cary Tagawa.
So was that based on Mortal Kombat?
I think it was more like Showdown in Little Tokyo.
Yeah, good call.
But
okay, I forgot about it.
I always liked it. He just has like such a distinct persona, a distinct look. And I just always liked that about him.
He's in The Phantom. You've seen The Phantom, right?
Yeah. And he's like really, from what I've seen in interviews and stuff, he's very like kind of chill, like laid back, like, what's up, brah? Like kind of like, it's very interesting.
The exact opposite.
Yeah, not what you would expect when you're meeting. You almost like think he'd be like, prestigious or something, but he's like,
your soul is mine.
Your soul is mine. I mean, he's so iconic in that role. They're still making like Mortal Kombat avatars in the game and stuff.
Yeah,
based on his appearance.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he's sorely missed in the new Mortal Kombat. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, in the new one, it's the guy who plays Shang Tsung. It's the guy from Dark Knight, right? It's the accountant,
the Weasley dude from Dark Knight. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I knew I recognized him.
Not. I mean, and I when I was watching it, I was like, "Who is this guy? I've seen him." Right. And I looked it up, and I was like, "Oh, it's him." Oh, okay.
He seems a little too civilized from what I can tell, at least up to.
He's just not menacing. He's not menacing enough, I think. He's no Tim Roth. He's no Thade.
He's no Thade.
Ironically, or not ironically, rather, just interestingly, Tim Burton is quoted as saying he would rather jump out of an airplane than make a sequel to this movie. So, but he didn't say whether or not with a parachute.
He said that almost immediately after the movie came out. He was entirely done with it. Like, he's like, no, thank you.
He's like, nah.
And you can totally see why, because this was a very big movie for Fox in terms of the marketing campaign that they had wrapped around it. And that's just not Tim Burton's sensibility. We know that because he made Batman Returns, which was like famously the one that made Warner Brothers be like, no, we're good. Thank you. We have to sell Happy Meals.
Well, I mean, it seems like that tends to happen with the, that's always a risk with a Batman type franchise. Cause you look what Zack Snyder did, you look with what Tim Burton did. And even Nolan, he was like, I'm doing 3 and I'm out. Bye. Like, I'm not sticking around for anything more. And Nolan was never into the Happy Meal game. So, and that's why his is ultimately like, it's a trilogy. It's done. I'm out. Bye. Not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
It's a tough nut to crack. But I gotta say, I'm super excited to see what Matt Reeves does with the Batman. I loved his Apes films. I loved Dawn. I really love War. War is actually my favorite of the three. I absolutely loved it. And
Woody Harrelson is so great in that one.
He's so good, and just like, man, just everything about it like is just amazing. I feel like it's like a great culmination of everything that came with Rise and Dawn.
Well, and the great thing about that trilogy, in my opinion, is that it was successful enough to keep going, but not so successful that the studio got its fingers in the pie.
Yeah.
Like they let it be what it needed to be. And so, War kind of didn't do as well as the other ones, or rather it didn't do as well as Dawn. And, you can maybe write that off as a disappointment. I wouldn't, but you got this trilogy and it stands apart, and it's reflective of the creative talent involved. And it's going to go on. Like it will live on whether they continue on, And that's the thing. I mean, that's the game when you're making studio movies. I always say this. It's like, look, if you're getting in the pool to make an IP with somebody else's money, you're going to be answerable to it. That's just part of it.
Yeah.
A director getting notes that's part of the game. That's not.
We're giving you $50 million.
Exactly.
You're going to have to take a few fucking notes.
Right.
Yeah. It always gets me when I see particularly people on Twitter that just really don't seem to understand how the entertainment industry works at all. And they're like, just let them make the movie they want to make, man. And I'm like, if you had $50 million and somebody was going to make you a movie, would you do that? Would you just give them that money and be like, here you go, just make your thing, do whatever? I'm sure it's nice for the filmmakers when that happens, and it tends to happen, on streaming. And I often find truly that a lot of these filmmakers, they get this, way more freedom than they're used to for these streaming films. And they're not usually as good. They're not usually their best work. 'Cause you're like, man, you guys probably needed some notes. This should need to be shorter or longer,
right?
Or something like, it just feels like, man, somebody needed to step in and kind of check on this. So I'm not completely averse to the whole process, because it is a creative process of putting together a movie and then having not so much a studio head, but just people that are watching what's happening. They're looking at dailies. They're looking at rushes. They're looking at all this stuff, and they're saying, I think we might need this. We might need that. It's a collaborative effort. That's what film is. A director does a lot. It's funny. I was just explaining this to somebody the other night, but how vast the director's job is. But, a lot of that is communicating to other people what you want done and them making it happen. And it's a group effort. Ultimately what it comes down to. And sometimes you need that little extra check on the things that you're doing. Like, hey, are we sure we want to do this? Or, hey, this doesn't match up, or whatever the case may be. And that's probably something that's missing, even with this, which is a big studio film that was made, but it was made rushed. It was pushed through, and it probably didn't have the same kind of discrepancy that a lot of their other films did. And that's probably where a lot of shortcomings existed or continue to exist with Planet of the Apes, is that, when you're moving that fast and you're like, hey, we got to hit a deadline, you tend to let things slide. You tend to not care about certain aspects. And you're like, we're just going to have to abandon it. I don't have time. I'm guarantee you that probably popped up numerous moments in the making of this movie. They're like, well, we're not gonna be able to do it. I don't know how we do it. We don't have the time to do it. We got to hit this deadline. And that makes it difficult. It makes it very difficult. I'm working on my graphic novel right now, and it's like, it's at my own pace, at my own schedule. I don't have a deadline. My deadlines are internal. So I'm like, I need to get this page done. I need to get to work. But, there's nobody standing over my shoulder saying, hey, get this done. But by that token, I'm able to focus on each page and say, this will be done when I feel like it's done, rather than somebody saying, hey, just rush it out. And you're a comic reader, so obviously, and I know you've read comics where you have the same art team on a book, say for 6 issues, and you're looking at issue 4, issue 5, and you're like, the standards have really dropped here. Like, it started off with so-and-so, drawing this book, and the first 3 issues were gorgeous because they had that lead up time to work on those pages and get them done. And then you get to issue 4 or 5 and you're just like, ooh, then sometimes you have like a backup inker or a backup penciler doing like 4 or 5 pages because they fell behind, and you're just like, you see those standards drop. And that tends to happen when you're on a rush schedule. And it's no different than in the film industry. You're pushing things too far, too fast, standards are going to drop.
That's the dilemma, because it is still art, right? Like it is still commerce. Like you get your art in wherever you can, but this is a machine that has to sell action figures and T-shirts and all that other stuff. And again, we can be cynical about it, which is fine, but that's the industry. That's how it works.
Well, it's called show business, not show art.
There you go.
So
not show art, exactly.
In the end,
you're talking about comic book art that kind of falls off. I'm thinking of the example that comes to my mind is Secret Wars, the miniseries. You remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
From the 80s. Mike Zeck, who's like one of the greatest comic artists of all time.
Yep.
And by the end, you can tell he was just fighting the dreaded deadline
like,
doom.
Oh my God.
Breathing down his neck.
Just let me get this book done. Yeah, I see it
Mike
countless times, even with modern artists too. I'm just like, then you see, a lot of times you'll see they'll find a replacement artist for one issue in an arc, and it kind of throws the rhythm off because you're like, okay, that sucks because you have a certain artist drawing it this whole time, and then all of a sudden they're drawing, the 5th or 6th issue out of, say, an 8-issue series. And you're like, it just kind of disrupts everything. It takes away from the whole voice of it.
Or the Infinity Gauntlet original series. You remember that? Like George Perez did the first half, and then
Lim. Yeah,
Ron Lim. Ron Lim took over. Yeah,
and I liked Ron. Like I was a big Ron Lim fan back in the day, so I was fine with that. But you do miss. You just miss that.
It's a switch.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen Perez finish Infinity Gauntlet. That would have been cool. Hell of an artist.
Oh, he just retired recently too, I think.
Yeah, well, hell of a career.
Everyone, no argument there. Yeah. So as I recall, this entire action sequence, I remember talking to you about the film afterwards, and you were like, "See, this is what I would have liked to see in the original film, is kind of just like a balls out humans versus apes battle." I
just want to see apes raining from the sky. It's actually pretty
specifically.
Cool. It's pretty fun. It's a pretty fun little scene. Damn fuel cells just waiting there, all depleted.
What I remember is the opening day of this movie. I had hoped to go see it with you and Sean, but you guys went skydiving.
Oh, is that the skydiving? That's crazy.
That was when you went skydiving. So you were like, "We're gonna watch it later," and I'm like, "Well, f you guys, I'm watching it opening day. This is
like, I am an Apes fan, you sons of bitches."
So I went with my cousins, and my one idiot cousin wasn't ready, and so we ended up late, and so we sat like 3 rows up. So I was like this the whole time. This is at the Cantera, and then the Sunday I went and watched it with you guys, and so I probably watched this movie about 4, possibly 5 times in the theater. That's how much I was trying to really.
How much you were trying to love it. You're like, I gotta love this movie. Like by the 5th time, you're like in the parking lot, like I don't love it.
One more.
I don't love it. Viewing. I don't love it.
I don't know if you remember this. It had a record-setting opening weekend for the time, and then it was followed immediately later by a record drop, like weekend 1 to weekend 2.
Yeah.
It just dropped like a stone, and that says that I think people showed up and they just weren't thrilled with what they got.
Yeah. You got to get those repeat viewings, man. That's where the money gets made. Repeat viewings, and then just getting people into the theater. Those are the 2 biggest things right there.
So you got them in. That they did show up,
but they ain't coming back. And they're not going to tell their friends to go. That's the other thing. Word of mouth, which is the greatest form of advertisement in the world, did not spread well for this one.
No. I mean, it was written off as a disaster pretty quickly, is my recollection. I would say that up until August, it was the worst thing that happened in 2001. Up until August.
a couple things happened afterwards, kind of disrupted.
After that, we reassessed the order.
Yeah. After that, Apes became a masterpiece.
Now that's Eugene Clarke, that actor. He, you know what I remember him from is he was in The Land of the Dead. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
The George Romero movie?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. As the main zombie.
Daddy.
Yeah.
The main zombie, yeah. See,
I saw Land of the Dead in the theater.
Oh, did you?
Did I see that?
What did you think? I'm a fan of that movie, but I'm curious what you thought.
I remembered, like, I didn't love it, but I wasn't like, that was a piece of crap. I left thinking, wow, it felt like it was like a first episode of a series. It felt more like a series episode than it felt like a one and done movie. So I think that's where I was kind of like, yeah, it was good, but I expected more. Like, I felt like, because it felt like so open-ended by the time you got to the end. And I was like, well, so is there going to be more? And I tend to, like, these days I get a little disillusioned by that. When they're like, they leave things like way too wide open. Just because if there's no promise for something to continue. I understand, like, in certain movies, like Stephen King is the king of, like, these, kind of languishing endings where, like, and then so-and-so showed up. Like, you look at Pet Sematary and you're like, okay, but what happened? Like, what happened then? Like, come on, let's get some finality here. And that kind of bothers me. But, then there's other open endings where I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Like, say for Zack Snyder's Justice League, I was like, dude, when can we see that next movie? Because that's what I want to see. But then there's other movies where you're just kind of like, wait, that's it? Like, it was a pretty cool premise. So yeah, I enjoyed Land of the Dead, but I didn't love it. But it was fun. It was, like, interesting.
Because after that, Romero did 2 more zombie movies, both of which were pretty terrible.
Yeah, wasn't one of them like a found footage type style one?
Yeah, that was
I didn't
awful.
see it.
Yeah, that was Diary of the Dead, and then he did a sequel to that, which was not found footage, but it picked up from there, called Survival of the Dead.
Oh yeah, I didn't see either one of those.
I think he wanted to do, like, one more big zombie flick before he passed away, but Land of the Dead was one that I actually, when we talk about, like, social commentary, I liked what that movie was doing, where it's like the haves and the have-nots, and you've got all the people who are holed up in their skyscraper like that. I mean, to me, that was like, that kind of stays with you, like this idea of, like, you think you're safe here, and then just imagine this horde comes in. I mean, that's what made that movie effective for me, and it's, the original Planet of the Apes is like that, where it's like, what would you do? You ask that question, like, if I'm in this situation, what do I do?
Yeah.
And when you see Charlton Heston running through the city and the apes are, like, throwing shit at him and he's getting, like, that's where do you turn? There's no one to help you. Where do you go? Yeah. That's the stuff that stays with me.
The terrifying stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. It's visceral. You feel it sort of inside you, and it's not gory. But
I think that's where you connect on a human level, and I think that's where you feel, and that's where I think a movie like, for this Planet of the Apes, like, it doesn't connect because we don't ever get to see the circumstances that the humans are living in, other than they're just, like, out in the forest somewhere, but you don't see their homes. You don't see them, like, taking care of their children or how they're surviving, how they're eating, how they're living. So it's very hard. They just kind of, they feel like people that just kind of roamed in and out. And it's hard to connect with them. But, I feel like that's how most movies connect with us as humans, is that we see ourselves in what's happening. And you ultimately, the question comes to you, what would you do? Yeah. I think those are the best. I think those are the best scenarios. You just start to think, man, you watch Shawshank Redemption, you're like, man, if I was in prison, what would I do? What if I was Andy Dufresne? What if I was Red? What if, what if I was in any of these scenarios? And you just, you tend to question who you are as a person and what you're capable of or incapable of. What if I was this monkey? What if I was Simos and I was flying a ship? And I was just flying a ship.
What's the ape's name?
Simos.
What's his name? No. What's his? I mean, that's like what they're calling him, right? But he has a name. Pericles.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, because in fact he's not Simos, right? The Simos
they create like ape. Well, there was the girl that
apes.
says Simos. So when he was looking at the footage inside the crashed ship, she's like, one of the apes, Simos, has taken over the group.
That's right. So he is like their ancestor, and he's Thade's ancestor. See, here's I think what would have made this approach work better is if they build up to the ending a little bit, because I think that's the biggest problem is the ending is a reflection of the original novel. But it doesn't really fit with what they're doing in this movie. And I think they could have done that in a couple of easy ways, where if you allude to the idea that they're off in space experimenting on these chimpanzees because they're not allowed to do it on Earth, or, there's some, the apes are being made hyper intelligent in space. They're doing something they shouldn't be doing. And then that's what causes their downfall when they crash, because the apes are just so much smarter than them. And you lay the track for that a little bit, and maybe allude to the idea that something is going on back on Earth, so that when he arrives back on Earth, there you can connect the dots to what we get with the ending, which I think is visually it's a great ending.
Yeah, it's like you're like, whoa, what? But I think you're right. Like the ultimately what's missing is the suspense, right? Like we don't have those things where like, ooh, you don't feel like the ticking clock. You don't feel like, in terms of things paying off, you're just like, you don't feel like there's something that's really at stake per se. Like what is at stake other than like Mark Wahlberg just getting back to his time and place?
Right.
Oh man,
yeah, like I need to get back because I know.
I remember laughing when I saw it in the theater, but then I was like, I felt bad because like, a poor little guy. You got Thade throwing around his fucking ancestor. That ain't cool. Dude, that's like your great grandfather. You just backhanded.
See, this is the problem because Burton said as much. He's like he didn't have an explanation. He was like, let the next guy figure it out. I've left something in place for the next guy. So you're talking about the Star Wars sequels. That's basically what Tim Burton did. Had they done another one, they would have had to figure it out.
Yeah.
But I remember the DVD of this movie actually came with a little insert that explained the time travel that gets us to the end of the movie.
That's when you know your movie's in trouble. You got to put something in a DVD insert. Like,
isn't that funny? Like literally it was like, well, because what they basically say, because when Wahlberg gets back to Earth, he sees that the statue, the Lincoln Memorial is now General Thade.
Yeah.
And the whole Earth has become Planet of Apes, right? So immediately you're like, well, wait, how would Thade be there? And so they had a little insert that says, well, after Wahlberg left, or after Leo left, Thade got out and repaired the other ship, and he left, and he arrived earlier to Earth than hundreds of years before Wahlberg, and that's how this all happened. And I'm like, look, you can't either. You say that in the movie, or that's too much work. You're making us do a lot of work just to get there, right?
And I feel like though too, and maybe this is just the product of how movies have been doing of late, but do you really need that big of an explanation for a cliffhanger ending like that? It's supposed to leave you with questions. It's supposed to make you think, whoa, wait, what? It shouldn't piss you off. It should be like, whoa. And then it should make you want to see more. That's the whole purpose that a scene like that exists. And I just don't see why people get so upset over that. I don't get it.
I think that if they were for sure going to make a sequel, then I think it's fine. I think if they didn't know they were going to make a sequel, it should have been something that could reasonably leave you with some sense of closure. Like, so for example, the original film, there was no intention of making 4 more films after it, right? But that movie ends and you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like yeah.
You could have gotten there in this with basically the same ending. Just get rid of the General Thade part of it and just say, like, he got back to Earth, but it's 500 years after he left. Like, he overshot his mark. Earth has turned into a Planet of the Apes. But you got there's your ending. You got basically the same ending, and you don't have to do a lot of explaining,
And that's, kind of goes back to the whole, like, finishing a movie with some finality, right? Like, just rather than leaving everything like wide open, like maybe somebody lives, maybe they die, maybe, maybe. And I'm like, I didn't just give you 2 hours of my life for a maybe, bro. Like give me a first, second, and third act, please. Like that would be much appreciated.
And if there's room, if there's a sequel warranted, come back and figure it out.
Yeah,
but it's when they were making The Fugitive, the Harrison Ford movie, that was they kept, because that was one where they were just really putting it together as they went, and they were trying to leave it open ended for a sequel. And Harrison Ford was like, "I'm not doing a sequel, so let's just figure this shit out." And thank goodness for that, because at the very least that movie, I mean, because they did do a sequel a couple years later, and it wasn't great,
but without him, nobody went. Well, I went. Damn it.
I went. I watched it in the theater.
Yeah, so did I.
Stuart Baird, not a great director.
And you had like Wesley Snipes. You have Robert Downey Jr. and Tommy Lee Jones. Like, yeah, it was.
How do you make something so aggressively average?
Yeah, I think that, and it's so immemorable. If you quizzed me on that movie right now, I'd be like, I saw it. I don't know what happens. Stuff happens. It was boring. There's so many movies back in the day. Yeah, Joey Pants is in it. There's so many movies back in the day where I'm just like, because when you're younger, it's like you go to the movies all the time. You don't have kids. You don't have, so much responsibility. You can go to the movies all the time, and there were so many movies I saw as a result of that where I was just like, please end now. Get me out of here. It's like. You tend to get a little more choosy. Yeah, you do. You're just like,
well, I've invested already. I got to finish this now.
Yeah, it's like this. Like, even though the end result is going to be a pile of shit, you still got to wait to smell it. It's like
you and I went to see Supernova.
Oh God, that was so awful. Oh, and I was like, I remember thinking like, oh, Walter Hill. No.
Yeah.
I recently watched poor Walter Hill, man. He's just like, he's not the same filmmaker he was. I recently watched the one with Michelle Rodriguez and Sigourney Weaver, where it's like the dude that gets like Michelle Rodriguez plays a guy that gets turned into a woman, like as like a cover or something, and it's like really just, I can't remember the name of it. The Assignment.
Okay.
Or Assignment, or it should be called Reassignment.
Oh my God.
But it's like, it's just such a weird movie. And like, you think about it, if it were done like in the 80s, like Walter Hill probably could have made something really cool. But like whatever it is today, I was like, this is not good. Such a disaster. And I kind of felt that way about, there were different points where I felt that way about Tim Burton, but ultimately Tim Burton, he tends to come back and do some really fun stuff. And, it's always a name that I look for. And I'm like, Tim Burton, he's got way more hits than misses.
Last movie? I'm having trouble remembering.
I think it was Miss Peregrine, or no, it was Dumbo. Dumbo was his last movie.
Dumbo. That's right. Yeah. Dumbo. Okay.
And I actually haven't seen Dumbo, believe it or not.
Yeah. See, that's when I thought it was fine, but I have no desire to revisit it.
That's why I haven't watched it, because it looks like it's probably fine. But I think the last movie of his that I really, really liked, that I think a lot of people didn't, was Dark Shadows. I really actually kind of love Dark Shadows. Yeah, it's like really funny and just kind of crazy. That was Ava Green's like really hot in it.
That was,
but like Johnny Depp was like, he's really funny in Dark Shadows.
He was really good in that movie. I liked him.
He's really funny. Makes me laugh. But I enjoy it. I like it. I like the soundtrack. I like the music. It's got a lot of old like 60s hits or 70s hits in it. And it's just it's a lot of fun. It's way more fun than people gave it credit for, I think.
I have barely any memory of it.
Maybe one day.
He produced Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, and that movie I liked.
Did you? See, I didn't like it. It kind of fell apart.
I mean,
I love Henry Jackman's score for it, but the movie itself,
I listen to that all the time.
Such a great score.
He's just a,
look at Estella.
I have this recurring.
Do you see? She's just look at. Yeah, this is
already.
I mean, she's like, she's obviously got to be wearing some kind of push-up bra. So they figured out how to make those in the jungle. And it's such an unearned like kiss, like the Hollywood
unearned
kiss.
kiss. I was just about to say that. Yeah, I was like, where did that come from?
It's just like it's like the Hollywood kiss. They need to rework the Hollywood kiss, you know, like this expected kiss. And it's not just, it isn't, and the thing is, it's not just guys that want to see this Hollywood kiss. It's women too. It's you know, it's LGBTQ. Like everybody's looking for the kiss, you know,
Right.
but they need to rework the kiss. The kiss needs to be earned. Like sometimes I wonder, it's like, has anybody in Hollywood ever actually had a first kiss with somebody? Like, I'm just kind of
Right.
wondering. Like usually there's some kind of chemistry there. It doesn't just come out of left field. You know, there's something that builds up to that moment.
See, you know what felt like that for me is in Captain America Civil War when Steve kisses Sharon.
It is weird, but it shouldn't be because, you know, Steve
they're
Rogers and
supposed to
Sharon
be-
Carter are like, have been
like
a couple of the comics
right?
for like decades. So it's kind of like, in my opinion, I think it's really a fault of the filmmakers for not building that better, you know, but they did start it in The Winter Soldier, where she was like his roommate and there was like that flirtation going on. And you kind of wanted to see it then. I think ultimately what they did is they waited too long for that payoff, you know? And they were like, oh, this has been a long time coming. Like, yeah, we probably should have done this in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, huh? Yeah. But they ended up spending more time with Black Widow than they did with Sharon Carter. So they just got too far away from it.
She's a tertiary character at best, and even in Winter Soldier, honestly.
Yeah. So here comes the big scene.
So great music in this scene. I really like it's very un-Elfman.
Yeah, Elfman can do these like kind of big, like almost I don't know, just like these kind of bombastic action scores. But you're used to him doing stuff like, you know, Edward Scissorhands or something like that. But you know, like the kind of kooky fun. But then you also got to remember, like, this guy that did the score for Darkman and a bunch of other movies where, you know, he can do these big thematic kind of action pieces as well.
Yeah. Look at that. It's a great shot right there. I love that where we see it coming down. See, I love all of this where everything looks exactly the way it's supposed to, except that it's an ape civilization. That's really, like, to me, out of this entire movie, that's the most evocative of the original film, where these are apes acting in a way that apes are not supposed to act like. That's what makes the original work, and I think that's what works here. So my thought here is, you know, rather than have it be specifically General Thade, you just have it be an ape. And he sees it, and he's like, what the hell? And then you have him run back to the ship. You show the chronometer. The date is off. And then rather than, General Thade, because if you're watching this with the General Thade thing right away, you're like, you're having to do the work. And I think it's the wrong question.
Yeah.
Because who cares about General Thade? It should be Earth became a planet of apes while he was gone. That's a great ending, because that's right out of the book. That's the novel ending.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. That's
so you've read the original novel? And
Oh. I read the novel before I saw the movie, actually.
Oh, wow.
So the movie is different enough that it was still a surprise for me.
I think an interesting ending for me that would have been better than having the apes. So apparently those helmets right there are Starship Trooper helmets. The exact helmets they use, they just repainted them and then put a visor on them. So that's literally a Starship Troopers helmet.
Oh yeah, I never would have noticed that.
I wouldn't have either until I read about it. And I was like, what the hell? But I think it would have been cool for him to land and for like the planet to be like, you know, maybe like overgrown and like some kind of apocalyptic thing. Like he gets there and it's overgrown and it's like apes, but they're not fully evolved yet. And they're like everywhere. But it's like, there's like, you know, grass growing over everything. And it's like the whole area has turned into like a jungle. I think that would have been more perplexing. You would have been like, what is going on? But you'd be like, I need to find out what happened. That would have been interesting.
No, I agree with that. You know, what's interesting is one of the earlier incarnations of this movie, you know, we were talking about the different versions, had Oliver Stone attached as a producer, and Phil Noyce was going to direct.
Yeah.
And to me, out of all of them, that's the one where I'm like, what does a Phil Noyce Planet of the Apes movie looks like? Like that sounds interesting to me. You know what I mean? Because I think he's a really interesting director.
Well, and apparently it was the studio didn't want to pay for the ending that they wanted to do. And that's one of the reasons they left, which was when he lands, when Leo lands, he's supposed to land in Yankee Stadium, and it's a bunch of apes playing baseball. And he's landing at a game, and I guess, I don't know, budgetary or whatever, they couldn't do it. And I guess Tim Burton wanted to do that ending as well, but they just couldn't do it. They couldn't afford it, or whatever the case would be.
That probably would have been a better ending too.
That would have been interesting. You know? You can see, like, you know, apes selling, you know, food vendors in the stands. All that crazy shit. Ape hitting a home run. Like, apes would have invented baseball? Wait a minute. Like, there's some crazy shit. Like, ultimately with the Planet of the Apes, you know, it's pure fantasy that, you know, finds its way to weave into pop culture. But it's hogwash, right? Like most of the stuff we like, it's bullshit.
If you think too deeply, you know,
if you think, it's ultimately, if you unravel it and unpack it enough, you get to the core, and like when you open that core, it says it's all bullshit. You're like, oh man, but it's all bullshit. But we love it, and then, you know, ultimately, you know, things have the value you give them, and I think that's what entertainment comes out. You know, that's how you build these things up, and that's how they become something, because you give them that value. Because they're not providing it, in a sense, they're not providing actual truth or anything like that. They're providing a fictional world, and then you kind of like draw your parallels, which we've talked about multiple times throughout this commentary, which is, you know, how you personally can draw your own parallels in terms of it being related to society, to race, to religion, whatever the case may be. You kind of pick and choose what you want to attribute to it.
I think that's it. Yeah.
And I think too is true with most art in general. Like, an artist will make something, you put it out to the world, and then they're going to interpret it how they want. It doesn't matter. You don't own it anymore. I see it as like, you make your art and you give it to the world, because at that point they're going to decide, each individual person that's faced with it is going to decide what they make of it. It doesn't matter what your original intentions were. You know, you see that all the time. Yeah. Like, I see, it's like the Wachowskis, they get mad that, you know, kind of like the right has adopted the red pill, right? You know, being red pill. Sure. And they're like, you go to hell, fuck off. And it's like, that's fine. You can say that. But ultimately, your art, you made it and it goes out to the world. You don't get to control it after that. You know,
people are going to talk back to it.
They're going to do what they're going to do with it. And there's just not much you can do about that. And nor should you. It's just kind of art coming alive and taking shape. And even with something like this, Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, I still appreciate, you know, this movie, even though like Burton hates it and Wahlberg hates it, and so many people are like, oh, fuck that movie. I'm like, oh, it's pretty fun. Like, it's silly, but hey, there's a Matt Shirey. You don't see many Shireys out there. Matt Shirey worked on Planet of the Apes.
It's the Shirey sighting in the wild.
There it is. You don't see that very often. But, you know, I can enjoy a movie like this, regardless of what their original intentions were. Just like we were talking about 13th Warrior. What a disaster. And I still love it, which I didn't love when I first saw it. But, you know, now I'm like, I love that movie. Go. So, good times. Good times.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you're saying, I mean, when you overthink anything, it can fall apart. I mean, the original Planet of the Apes, which I adore, I'm not precious about it to the point where, I mean, let's be real. The entire film's conceit rests on it being a shock when Taylor finds himself back on planet Earth, when in fact, as soon as he sees, or rather he hears the apes speaking English, that should be the point where he's like, oh, I must be on Earth. Because otherwise, how could this possibly be happening? And that's just one of those things where you squint past it, because otherwise you can't enjoy the movie.
And actually, watching this makes me want to go back and watch the original Planet of the Apes. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I'd love to hear
your thoughts on that.
It might be time to revisit. And I don't think there's a lot of them I haven't seen. I haven't seen most of the sequels of the originals. Okay. I've seen the original, but I don't think I've seen parts of the sequels, but I've never sat down and watched them one by one.
I think they're all worth watching to some extent or another, but I would say the first one is the best, obviously, and then of the sequels, the third one is the best of those, which is the one where the two apes come back in time to the 1970s. And it's a much smaller scale movie, but it's pretty effective. The fourth and fifth one are essentially the basis of the new trilogy. So Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, that's number 4, and Battle for the Planet of the Apes, that's essentially the three new films echo those two films. So you can, if you were to watch those, you'd see some interesting sort of parallels.
Yeah, I think that would be a fun experiment.
It's Caesar, right? Because those the fourth and fifth films have Roddy McDowall playing Caesar. So Andy Serkis is playing a version of that character from the original films. Yeah,
that's wild. So I didn't know all that.
Yeah.
This is why I have you on here.
That's my one job.
I need the expert.
Give the ape info.
Well, that's the end of the movie. I'm sorry, Zaki, you were about to say something.
I just wanted to say, I mean, for all the mixed feelings I might have about this movie, I get to have a fascinating conversation for the last 2 hours that I will now forever associate with this movie. And that's all kinds of good news as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's kind of my point of doing these. Hopefully people get some enjoyment. And if you're sitting at home and you just want to watch a movie, but you don't feel like watching it by yourself, hopefully you can put on this, one of these commentaries and join in, have somebody to watch the movie with.
Nice.
Again, just to remind everyone, Zaki has his own podcast, Movie Film, which I've been on multiple times in the past. They do their own commentaries as well. So they have commentaries. And you can follow Zaki at Zaki's Corner. And then you have Zaki's Corner website where you're still doing movie reviews.
Yeah.
I guess not as much interviews due to COVID, but
I've lessened my posting on my own site substantially just because I've been so busy, but I write regularly for the San Francisco Chronicle.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I just this week, my review of The Falcon and Winter Soldier went up. I've got a thing going up later about Law and Order, Organized Crime. I also write for IGN. My review of Without Remorse just got posted a few hours ago as we were talking. So
nice.
So I'm all over.
That's right. You can find Zaki. You just Google Zaki Hasan.
There you go.
Find him. So that's it for this commentary. Thanks everybody for joining us. Again, you know where to find Zaki. You know where to find me, Arctic Ninja Paul. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me here on Arctic Ninja Network, and then also Arctic Ninja Designs on Etsy to get shirts. Got all kinds of cool movie shirts, merch, stuff like that. So check it out, and we'll see you guys on the next one.